The Brewers sweep the Yankees with 2 walk-off wins, and then they came 1 pitch away from sweeping the Padres as well. This is the Brewer Fanatic Podcast. I'm Spencer Michaelis. Jack is unavailable tonight, so I've got Ryan Topp of Milwaukee's Tailgate Podcast with me tonight. Thanks for helping us out and joining me today. Ryan, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Brewers are playing really well. When the only loss over the last, how many games is it? 7 or 8 games was basically a meltdown, a bullpen meltdown. And other than that, things have been really good. You can't complain too much. So pretty happy.
Good. Yeah, I think it's hard to complain with how they've been playing lately, and we're going to get through a lot of that as we get going here. But before we dive into the Yankees and Padres series, let's take a look at some of the injury updates from this week, starting off with Christian Yelich, who returned from the IL, kind of. Tyler Black was optioned in the move to bring Yelich off of the IL. He played in 1 game, and now he has missed the last 2 with some back soreness. So Murph talked about it yesterday, and then he also talked about it today. We're recording on Thursday after the final game of the Padres series, but both times it was more or less along the lines of like, well, he's feeling okay, but we're going to be very careful with it. Murph is kind of leaning towards the protecting Yelich from himself type of idea, which I'm appreciative of, and I hope that he takes that approach more often. I think that's something we could do more often than we do. But the word today was more like, if it doesn't feel much better tomorrow, there is a chance it sounds like he could go back on the IL. So we'll see where that ends up going. Obviously, next week we'll have an idea of how it plays out. But we did get a question from Uncle Ron on this, asking, curious why Yelich never goes on rehab assignments, but never seems to be ready when he comes off the IL. So, Ryan, I don't know if I didn't really look into any numbers. I would say normally when he's come off the IL, I haven't noticed that it's like a major, like there's a long journey to him getting back on track and playing fine. But I know he has had a couple times where he's come off the IL and something like this has cropped up where maybe a different injury or just some soreness or whatever has kind of made it hard for him to get fully back into the swing of things. From my perspective, I would imagine he just doesn't want to waste at bats in AAA if he's feeling good. At that point, he's probably feeling like, okay, well, if I feel fine, I know I'm going to be able to step into a big league lineup and hit. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't say for sure. But it does feel like something where it doesn't feel like this is the first time he's had something pop up. Do you think going on rehab assignments is something he should be doing? Is it something the Brewers should kind of force him to do? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you kind of defer to the veteran on this sort of thing, and you're not, if he feels ready to go, then fine, let him go ahead and do that. I'm looking at it. The last time he played a game in Nashville was 2021. So he hasn't gone on a rehab assignment at least since then. It's the only time he ever played in the minors for the Brewers. Since he's come to Milwaukee, it was the only time. And that was a 3-game, 7 plate appearance little stint down there. And he has not gone down to AAA at all since. So, yeah, I mean, this isn't a thing he regularly does. I do kind of wonder because more than a lot of hitters, Yelich seems to have very precise timing needs as far as like what his swing requires and what he needs to be successful, that you kind of wait for him to get into a run where he is successful in terms of his timing, and that does seem to take a little bit longer for him, but I don't know that he could actually accomplish that and get his timing right facing AAA pitching. I don't know that that's going to necessarily be helpful to him anyways. So, and that's a thing with a lot of players where it's, I guess if the question would be like getting just testing out and seeing what he needs to and is capable of doing physically, I think that would be one thing. But if it's a matter of getting his timing against big league pitching, which is what I think the main issue for him is, I don't know how helpful AAA is going to be at that anyways.
Yeah. I think, like you said, in terms of the physical part of it, if this has popped up before, and for some reason I'm feeling like he has had something similar where he kind of came back and then it was a quick turn around into something else kind of minor bugging him, then maybe you could make the argument that, hey, maybe a couple games down there to feel out how he feels physically before he comes back would be worthwhile, so that you don't have to either restart the IL stint, or you don't have to make multiple roster moves to kind of figure things out. But I'm with you. I feel like in terms of being ready to hit in big league games, he's a guy like Christian Yelich is just going to need to hit in big league games to be able to figure that out. I don't know what AAA pitching is necessarily going to do for him. I even look at like the Churio rehab assignments have normally not gone very well, and then he's basically been fine when he starts facing big league hitting. I don't know how much you necessarily gain from it, especially as somebody with as much experience as Yelich has. So we'll see. It could be something they need to look into. If this is kind of a recurring issue, we'll kind of see where this one ends up landing. If he's fine and he plays tomorrow, then it's probably no big deal and we just move on. But if he does have to go back on the IL, I think there are probably some fair questions to be asked there. But some other injury updates that we can move to here. Brandon Woodruff was scheduled to throw a bullpen session today, actually. I'm not entirely sure if and when he did that today, but assuming he did go through that, it would be his first time on a mound since the game where he was throwing in the mid 80s against the Diamondbacks and ended up leaving the game with the dead arm. The timeline the Brewers are giving is still kind of a return before the end of May. So assuming today went well, I think that's probably how you would be tracking. If it didn't go well, then maybe you have to push that timeline out a little bit, but we'll probably learn a little bit more about that over the next couple of days. Angel Zerpa underwent his Tommy John surgery on Monday this week. So he will be missing the rest of the season and probably into a good chunk of 2027. Jack and I talked about it last week. I think there's a real possibility he has probably pitched his last game as a Brewer. Maybe they can come to an agreement on a 1-year cheaper deal than even what arbitration would kind of be pushing him towards, just as a prove it deal to keep him in the organization after they gave up, a decent amount to bring him in. Ryan, I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Is that something you could see happening, or do you think this is kind of, unfortunately, just a short term and this is all we're going to see Zerpa give the Brewers as a reliever for the team?
If they work out something that isn't just arbitration or whatever, the Brewers offering him the next year of arbitration, which will be their option at the end of the season, I could almost see them doing a 2-year deal, though this is a little bit different than that, in that he should be back at some point during next year. At some point during that season, he should be back, but not a guarantee. But if they want to work out something along those lines, I could see that. How much time does he have left after that? Are we looking at, he has 2 years of arbitration left after this year, correct? After, it would be 2026, 2027, 2028, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I could see something that covered both 2027 and 2028 in that case as being something that they would be more interested in doing going into that. But yeah, I think that it is quite possible that they decide to move on from him and just decide that that's that. It's unfortunate. You do wonder about the WBC of it all, but that also seems like the price that is going to have to be paid for the WBC to exist. And you get why Matt Arnold kind of grumbled about it and was like, yeah, we get nervous about our guys pitching in the WBC because it's a lot for them to be pitching with that sort of intensity that early in the year. They're, not really ramped up intensity wise, and they're going into games that really matter a lot, and they're going to be full of adrenaline and going. And it's impossible to know whether or not that was actually a factor, but you do have to wonder.
Yeah, that kind of ties into one of the questions we got, so I'll bring that here. Uncle Ron asked, maybe not the pod to ask this question, but is there a broader baseball conversation that needs to be had about the WBC? Lots of guys who participated are either hurt or off to terribly slow starts. So, Ryan, I think you were kind of hinting at pitchers especially are where I think things get much more difficult. Um, it's a quick ramp up. It is high intensity where you are not used to doing that at that time of year as a pitcher. Normally in spring training, you're at about as low intent on a game mound as you will ever get in your professional career, especially as like a major league pitcher who's in spring training for probably not just the first time, not the second, like you're probably in a third, fourth year at least when you're a guy who's actually capable of pitching in the WBC. So that time of year is normally a very, very low intent time for you. And for pitchers, I think there is absolutely risk. And I just don't know that there's too much that can be done because I do think the WBC is very good for baseball. I think it was a really exciting time of the calendar that's not normally at all kind of tied to baseball. Normally, people aren't really. I mean, obviously, the people who are listening to this podcast and guys like us are probably pretty interested in what's happening in spring training. But I would say most people just kind of pay attention once the regular season gets going. So normally, that's not a time of year where baseball has the attention of people. The WBC does create attention. It gives attention to the game at a time that they don't normally have it. So I think in the long run, it's a net positive for baseball. But these are the types of things that are just going to happen sometimes, and it's really unfortunate. And it did happen to a Brewers pitcher this year. Happened to a guy who looked really good in the WBC in Zarpa. He looked like someone who's going to help the Brewers quite a bit this year. And unfortunately, that's just how it played out. But I do think it's a little too specific to start talking about guys struggling being tied to it. I mean, Brice Turang played in the WBC. He is not struggling at all. He's crushing. Bobby Witt has 3 WAR already this season and an 884 OPS coming into today. And Bryce Harper's got an OPS over 900. And Paul Skeens is absolutely shoving. Aaron Judge is crushing the ball. Mason Miller's the best closer in baseball. Like I get it. There are guys like Cal Raleigh, and I understand that there are players who have had some issues, and I just think it's pretty hard for me to tie that to the WBC. I think the injuries for pitchers can absolutely be tied to that. I think minimally you have to talk about it. But I do have a harder time blaming early season struggles on the WBC. I just, unless it's related to an injury that popped up during that time, I don't really know how you can really tie those together. I don't know if you have different thoughts on that, Ryan.
No, and it's not like pitchers can't get hurt during spring training. We see that all the time. Just the process of ramping up, a lot of pitchers do get hurt. But it is a question that does kind of sit in the back of your brain because we know that those pitchers are pitching with more intent and more intensity than they would be if they were in spring training in a lot of cases, that they are letting it go because these games matter in a way that a spring training game just doesn't, especially for a guy who, like you said, these guys are guys who are established big leaguers. They're not generally fighting for roster spots in a lot of cases here, you know, especially like a guy like Zerpa. That wasn't a guy who was fighting for a roster spot. So you wonder, but I think that it is probably something that just needs to be accepted for this. And I don't know what a good alternative is. I've heard people talk about doing something in the middle of the season instead, or maybe taking the knockout phase and putting it in the All-Star break instead. And maybe that is something to look at, but I can't imagine teams are going to want to do that, turning their pitchers who are already tired and exhausted over to somebody else to manage them during the middle of the season like that. It's hard enough for them to let them go in, you know, the early season, like in the preseason era of it. I think managers have enough trouble with that, let alone doing it in the middle of the season. So I don't know that there is a good time necessarily to do this. I don't think it's at the end of the season. Probably the best time is during spring training, but it comes with this added concern.
Yep. I would agree with that. Another arm potentially coming back soon. Quinn Priester threw a 50-pitch bullpen earlier this week, and he is scheduled to start another rehab assignment on May 16th. As of now, that first start will be for the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers against South Bend. The Brewers are now kind of estimating an early June return for Quinn Priester. I don't know about you. For me, it's going to need to look a lot better. And not even just in terms of the stuff, but the command is going to have to be a lot better for me to feel good about taking any of the options the Brewers currently have for their rotation out of the equation and putting Quinn Priester in there. I don't know how much high A will tell us, but I at least, being in and around the zone could be a good sign for him there. But what are your thoughts on Priester? I'm still kind of in the mode of I'm not really expecting much from him this year.
Yeah, I'm going to need to see something before I'm going to believe it at this
Yep.
point because, yeah, so far I have watched some of Quinn Priester on these rehab starts, and it hasn't been pretty. And we're just going to need to see something that he is capable of getting, minor league hitters out, and that the stuff is back to where it was last year before we can do that. And I will believe it when I see it. I'm hoping for it. I think that it is quite possible. I think I don't want to sound too negative about that. I think it's possible, but this is one of those injuries that they're saying it's not that bad. That it is in the family of thoracic outlet syndrome, but not like the bad version of it. This is not the kind that makes them go in and have to hack out a rib generally. But the fact that it's in that family and it doesn't seem to be getting better starts to make you wonder, okay, well, what is going to make it better? Because clearly what he was showing before this cropped back up and he, had to be shut down again, that wasn't going to cut it. So yeah, it's just a matter of we have to wait and see how this is going to play out. And if he is ready to go, how these things go, chances are there will be a spot that is waiting for him by that time for, hopefully for when he comes back. We will see. But yeah, it's going to be a wait and see issue.
Yep. Agreed. Brandon Lockridge suffered a pretty gruesome looking injury during the Yankees series this week, sliding into the corner of the concrete section of the wall down the left field line. X-rays were negative. As of today, he's actually off of crutches, but he did require a lot of stitches. He had a deep cut that Murph basically said was essentially almost all the way down to the bone. And the timeline is probably looking at around a month, if not longer, for him to heal and to be able to come back. But good news that nothing was broken. I mean, it looked like he hit that wall hard. He was going after the ball, slid as he was kind of nearing that corner. And I haven't seen who was the Braves. It was a little bit different situation, but who was the Braves right fielder that slid into the wall and he broke a leg, I believe, doing it. I can't remember his name, but I hadn't seen anything with that wall other than, Frelick kind of going into that weird opening and kind of hurting his hip going into the 2024 playoffs, I believe. But this was a tough one to watch, and you could see Miz in the moment was immediately like pretty concerned about it, and everyone around there, and Lockridge didn't look like he wanted to put any weight on it. And frankly, I was expecting worse news than we ended up getting on it being a deep laceration and pretty much nothing else. But had you seen anything like that other than, again, I can't remember who the guy's name is on the Braves, but that was a pretty rough one to watch.
Yeah, he went in harder than I think he needed to, and that was always going to be a tough play to try to make.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just inadvisable. I appreciate the hustle and appreciate the trying, but like this goes back to the thing about Bill James way back in the 80s talking about how it's great to have guys who want to go crashing into walls for your team, but if they're good players, you don't necessarily want them to crash into walls because that's how you get hurt. And he's particularly singled out Paul Molitor, who had a real issue for that early on in his career, that like discretion is often the better part of valor on these things. And in just a regular season game, you don't necessarily need to be going all out like that. I do wonder, because the thing that this instantly made me think of was a few years ago when the Brewers, Darren Ruff, remember when Darren Ruff was a Brewer for 30 seconds? He goes into that thing that they roll the tarp up on in Cincinnati and lacerated his knee to the point that it went down and it clipped the ACL, right? Like it got a tendon in there and it ended his career. And as far as I know, there's still legal matter pending about this because he is suing the team for not protecting that this jagged metal sharp edge that was right on the field of play, right? Where players who are running for, say, a foul ball would go running into it. And yeah, I completely see that. And I kind of don't understand how this hasn't been covered up already, how something like this that was capable of doing this was left uncovered. Maybe there's some explanation I don't understand, but you do got to wonder about it, right? Because this seems like on a place where guys who make tens of millions of dollars a year are running around at full speed trying to make plays on which the outcomes of games hinge. You don't want to have like hazards out there that could potentially, cut them to the bone if you don't have to. So you got to wonder about that.
Yeah, the rough one did definitely come to mind for me too. That was basically a metal piece sticking out of the tarp, and yeah, that one is really bad. Like you said, there's still legal action going on between him and the Cincinnati Reds on that one, so it effectively ended his career. Yeah, I don't know. My guess is that part of the reason the padding leaves that opening is so that baseballs don't get stuck between the ground and the padding.
Mm-hmm.
But it still feels like there's got to be a way we could, like, there has to be something they can do to make that work where the padding both won't be in the way and will actually cover the vast majority of the wall, or all of the wall. Because, yeah, I mean, every time you see an outfielder go running that direction, you start to kind of get worried about it. And you have the tarp not far from there, which I understand why they technically have to have the tarp, but it is always like, okay, someone's going to get hurt on a tarp that is absolutely pretty much never needed. Which, yeah, there's a lot of hazards in that area, I guess. So again, I think good news that he kind of came out of it with a reasonable outcome rather than what looked like could be really, really bad. But yeah, we will see where that one ends up landing over the next few weeks, but good to see him moving around without crutches now. And yeah, we will see. Rob Zastryzny completed live batting practice on May 11th, traveled to Nashville. He was scheduled to begin a rehab assignment on Wednesday. He didn't pitch on Wednesday. It sounds like he's probably going to get into the game tonight. So we will probably have an update of some sort by next week on how that went for him. Jared Koenig successfully threw a bullpen session on Tuesday this week. That was the first time he'd thrown on a mound in a pen session since he went down with his elbow injury at the beginning of the year. And then Akil Baddoo, remember Akil Baddoo? He is scheduled to begin a rehab assignment with Nashville tomorrow on Friday. I would imagine that one was a split contract, so I believe they'll be able to put him in AAA. Or does he have an option? Either way, I believe he's able to stay in Nashville even when the rehab assignment is over. But given all the injuries to the outfielders, you never know. Maybe Akil Baddoo will actually be an option for the Brewers at that point. But that can move us past these injury updates, as has come kind of the norm. There are quite a few of them this week, but most of them are positive. So hopefully we keep trending in the right direction on a lot of these. And at some point this year, it'd be great if I'm not, or Jack and I aren't having to read like 9 of these every week, but we will hope to get there at some point. Moving into the week in review, and like I said earlier, it was a very, very good one for the Brewers. Starting with the sweep of the Yankees, and game 1 was the Jacob Misiorowski show. This one was a 6-0 win for the Brewers. Miz was just absolutely dominant in this one. He threw the 7 fastest pitches for a starting pitcher in the pitch tracking era, all in this game. He averaged 101.1 on his fastball for the game over the course of 95 pitches. I mean, this is one of the best lineups in baseball, and Miz absolutely shut the Yankees down and did it in dominant fashion. Was this the best start of his career to this point in your eyes?
I don't know. I wonder, because I didn't see all of this start. I was listening to a lot of it on the radio, and then was at a bonfire. Actually, we were watching it on a big screen outside, but wasn't really paying that close of attention to it. It's kind of in and out a little bit. And the other game that would be in contention for this, the second start of his career, that one against the Twins, that one was also a game I didn't see. So in person, and like I pulled up my phone and was watching. I was actually at a concert that night. So I've kind of missed, I think, the best couple starts. I was at his first start of his career in person, that the one against the Cardinals. But this seemed like it's about sort of the peak of what you can expect from him, and he does seem to have leveled up, right? This seems like a guy who has taken another step forward from what he was last year. I don't think he's perfect yet, but this is a new level of Jacob Misiorowski. And so that's why when he throws that number of pitches that hard, I get uneasy about it, and it's not a fun instinct. I think like I should be more celebratory and more happy about it, but you just get so paranoid and worried about a guy who's so close to the top of his range that much in a single start like that you do kind of wonder about it, right?
Yeah, a little. I don't know, and I'm not saying he's not at any point going to have arm issues. Like almost every pitcher is going to have arm issues at some point in their career. Like it's part of the equation now. Everybody is going pretty close to their max effort on almost every pitch at this point in baseball. Like that's just how it is. That's how you're best going to get hitters out, and that's kind of the best way to keep a rotation spot is by being at your top output in terms of effort on almost every pitch. Miz is one of the freakiest just in terms of like his flexibility and the way he moves. Like he's really, really using his legs a lot more than his arm when he throws. I think his mechanics are genuinely some of the better mechanics in baseball at this point. And that sounds like for a guy who's all arms and legs flailing all around, it sounds very hard to believe, but his ability to use his lower half, and they were talking on the broadcast today because he made another start this week that went, or yesterday, I should say, about how he had actually put on 30 pounds in the last year or so. And I mean, when a guy is that lanky, you can barely even notice it, but it is kind of funny if you look back at some older video in the minors, like you can see it then. You can absolutely see that he's put on some pretty good weight. It's just less noticeable, I think, compared to just kind of what you're used to seeing on the big league mound. But I'm not super worried about it. And again, he absolutely could get hurt, but in my eyes, it's about the same odds as anybody. Like Brent Suter needed Tommy John surgery. I technically would need Tommy John surgery if I ever want to pitch again, and I topped at 85 my entire life. So like it's more a matter of, I do think, like you said, like reaching back for basically what is his top end velo. I get the concern with that, and I think there's probably some validity to it, but the way he does it, the way he moves, I just don't honestly buy that he's putting that much stress on his arm. And that's encouraging. That's a really good thing. That's something that, I mean, that should bode well for the future if I'm correct in what I'm seeing and what I'm thinking here. But yeah, I just genuinely sat in my living room and watched that start, and I was laughing like the whole time. I was just laughing. Like that stuff is, it might have been the best stuff I've ever seen a starting pitcher have in a game ever. Not just the velo, just the combination of all of it. It was so good, and it was such a good lineup, and they looked helpless. Like it was just incredible to watch. So for me, I guess I'll always come back to, like, I think almost every pitcher is a ticking time bomb. So I just don't find myself really concerned about these things, and I get it. And I don't blame you for thinking that way. I get annoyed with the people who, under every single video of him, are like, Tommy John coming soon. He's going to, like, that stuff. That bothers me. I don't like that. I'm like, what's the point of that? Enjoy what you're seeing. You're watching something you've never seen. But as a Brewer fan, I do understand having like some concern and at least being like, I don't want this to happen because it'd be very bad for the Brewers. And I fully understand that. But just from my view, I don't worry about it too much. I think he does a lot of things really well that should help him as he continues going through his career, despite reaching back for velo we've really never seen from a starter.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder, because we saw an example of this late in his game that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but in that game he didn't seem to be up at that high number much. He was more sitting in the 99 to 100 range, But at the very end of that appearance, right before he gets taken out, he ends the last batter, and he is at that point seeming to be reaching back for more. And now he's throwing 103 miles an hour at that point. And those sort of situations, that sounds like a pitcher who is kind of pacing himself and is waiting for the moment to unload. And I think that I feel a lot more comfortable about that sort of thing, where you're not trying to do that, for entire innings, where it's like, yeah, okay, this is my last, this is it. This is my last gasp. I'm going to go out and do this, which then did make me wonder about him coming back out. But just like the pacing of it. And as a pitcher, you would have a better idea of this because there's been all kinds of talk over the years about this. Justin Verlander talked about how he used to, pace himself and leave something, a little bit extra for the very end to finish a start. And that there came a point during the super happy fun ball era of baseball in like 2016 where he could no longer really do that. He needed to be at the top end of his velocity range. And he said that I never had arm trouble until I was consistently throwing at the top end of my velocity range for entire starts. And then at that point was when the arm trouble started to crop up. And that's when he had to get cut on for the first time and all of that. So that is always stuck in my brain as a thing when, pitchers talk about the idea that they couldn't pace themselves the way that they used to. And this is a thing throughout baseball history. Pitchers have had to throw more and more intensity throughout an entire start, kind of throughout the entire time of baseball. Back in the dead ball era, before you go back to like the 19-teens, there really wasn't a lot of concern. Pitchers wouldn't really do much of anything until there were runners on base. And that's when they would start bringing their best stuff. And that's how they were able to, pitch as much as they did and make, like 40, 50 starts a year and throw 350 innings. You wonder how guys were capable of doing that. Well, it was because they were pacing themselves in a way that, after the home run ball comes into the game with Babe Ruth in the 20s, they stopped being able to do that. And it's been sort of a war of attrition on that ever since. Like, pitchers have been able to pace themselves less and less and less over time as we get to the era where, your standard middle infielder can, generally pop out like a dozen home runs a year. So there's just not as many safe places for a pitcher to be able to back off and feel confident that it's going to be okay. So I get it. Like you said, I understand that instinct and that impulse, but man, I hope that there's discussion and there's like thought process going into this, that like, hey, there are times when you don't need, because let's face it, Jacob Misiorowski can get batters out without throwing at 103. He can get guys out throwing 99, 100. Like, he can do that. So I hope that is a discussion, at least, that is being had.
Yeah. And like you said, when pacing yourself is throwing 98 to 100, like, you can get away with it more than other players can, because that's just insane. How is that even a thing? But yeah, I just, for the most part, just watching him, I know it's a violent delivery, but it just doesn't feel like it's something where he's ever putting insane stress on the arm. And that gives me a lot of comfort. I think it's what has helped lead to some of the cramping in the lower half. Like, he is using his legs at an insane, like, it's incredible how much he's getting out of his legs. And when you do that, they start to tire out as the game goes on, and then your muscles get a little tighter. You start having some cramping issues. Like, that adds up to me too. So we'll see where it goes from here. But no matter what, I mean, it is just absolutely incredible to watch him right now. And you traded Freddie Peralta. You were worried about who's going to be the number one. Is Woodruff going to be it's Miz, and it's not close. He looks like an ace, and a legitimate ace, just in terms of the stuff and how he's doing so far this year. And like you said, I don't think we've seen the best version of Miz yet. I think there's still more in there, which is pretty insane to think about. But in terms of the offense in this game, the Brewers were able to scratch 4 runs against Max Fried in the second inning. Fried lost his command a little bit. Some walks were mixed in. And then the Brewers had a very Brewers inning to score the 4 runs. Brandon Lockridge had a 75-mile-per-hour ground ball RBI single. Sal Frelick had a 63-mile-per-hour looping RBI single. Joey Ortiz hit a chopper that scored another run on a fielder's choice. And then Jackson Churio rolled a 79-mile-per-hour RBI single up the middle, where it seemed like the middle infielders for the Yankees kind of had some miscommunication. Neither of them went for the ball. Both of them went to cover second base. And that was the 4 runs that came across. Lockridge and Contreras would add RBI singles later in the game. This was the game that Lockridge had his injury when he slid into the wall. And then out of the bullpen, Shane Drouin also looked fantastic and has been really, really good since he came back and has been pitching in this bullpen role. We can talk about him a little bit more later, but 3 innings, he got his first major league save because he threw the final 3 innings in a game that was a 6-run game at the time. He only allowed 1 hit. That was the only base runner he gave up. Again, against a very good Yankees lineup, Shane Drouin looked very, very much like a guy who might continue to earn bigger innings in this bullpen role as we go forward. But moving to game 2, Kyle Harrison on the mound in this one. Probably not his best start of the season. He gave up a leadoff home run to Paul Goldschmidt. He still racked up the whiffs in this one. It was a 40% whiff rate on the game, but the command wasn't really there. He had 4 walks, so the final line was 4 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned, 4 walks, and 6 strikeouts, and the 1 home run to Goldschmidt. Bullpen Chad Patrick appears to be back, though. He was the player to follow Kyle Harrison in this one. He ended up going 3 innings. The velo was up about a tick and a half on average across all of his pitches. The whiff rate was 38%. He ended up going 3 scoreless. He struck out 5 to only 1 walk and 2 hits. I'll get to this later because it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this. I know they're not ruling him out as a starter again right now, but as people do get healthy, I think this is where he's going to wind up being, is in the bullpen. But on the offensive side of things, the Brewers struggled against Cam Slittler. Not a surprise. That dude is very, very good. And this was an impressive start because he got smoked by a 108-mile-per-hour ground ball in the calf in the first inning and just kept fighting through it. He looked like he could barely walk coming off of the mound half the time, but he was still pitching well. I was questioning, I will say, the bunting Brewers, who always are bunting, decided that the hobbled pitcher on the mound, they weren't going to even try and lay a single bunt down for a hit. Like, I watched David Hamilton come up and just keep swinging against a guy who was barely able to move off the mound. And like, this seems like the exact time where I'd probably be trying to force him to be part of the play, but whatever. It ended up working out because the first pitch that a reliever threw, Jake Bauers took deep to right center. In the 8th inning, Brice Turang singled, then he stole second, and then he scored on a 2-out single by William Contreras to tie the game. Aaron Ashby looked like he was going to have a scoreless 10th inning. He had a scoreless 9th, and then he went back out for the 10th with the Manfred man on second base. He was in a really good spot. He had Ryan McMahon in an 0-2 count after swinging at a pitch in front of the plate, and he went back to the curveball, and he left it in far too hittable of a place. He left it up above the knees. McMahon was able to hit a grounder into center to take the lead in the top of the 10th, but the Brewers, along with some help from Cruz, the Yankees reliever who had some pretty spotty command in his bottom of the 10th inning, were able to win this one. Jackson Cherio had an infield hit to tie the game, and then William Contreras hit a sac fly barely deep enough, probably not even technically deep enough, but Aaron Judge's throw went up the line and Rengifo was able to score from third. So that was the first walk-off of the series. Mother's Day was on Sunday, and this was another really fun game to watch. Logan Henderson got the start in this one. He went 5 innings, 2 earned, struck out 5, only walked 1, did give up a home run to Aaron Judge in the first. Spencer Jones had an RBI single in the second, which was his first career hit as well. A Garrett Mitchell sac fly made it 2-1, and then Blake Perkins had a 2-run single for the lead. And if for no other reason than that being a really cool moment for him on Mother's Day, the year after losing his mom, and there was a really nice story from Todd Rosiak last year about their relationship and everything else. And I know that was kind of an interesting, probably a weird day for Perkins for his first Mother's Day without his mom, but a guy who'd really struggled this year, really was only back up because of the Lockridge injury, and to come through and have a go-ahead hit in this one, that was one of my favorite kind of under the radar moments of the season so far, just seeing him come up in that type of spot.
Yeah, it's been a real struggle for Perkins this year, and so just having any success, regardless of all the rest of it, that's a good moment for him and for the team and all of that. But with that added part of it being Mother's Day, yeah, that's where you start to talk about it being a special thing, and that it was a pretty special weekend overall.
Yeah, absolutely it was. DL Hall would come into the game and he walked 2 batters. Aaron Judge was erased on some sort of somewhat delayed steal. I don't know what he was doing, what happened on it, but Gary Sanchez double clutched and still threw him out at second. But then he still followed that one up with another walk. So he kind of got bailed out with the Judge play. Then he walked the next batter and then allowed a double. So that brings us to a question from John, who asks, is DL Hall good? His FIP is 4, and he has a very low BABIP. He's walking 18% of batters, but he has a sub-2 ERA. So Jack kind of hinted at this last week. I think there are pretty real concerns with DL Hall, and 18% walk rate is not going to work in the long haul. It just won't. It's far too high. Now, I will say, last year he had the issue of the walks and also not much in the way of whiffs or strikeouts. He was getting a ton of soft contact, and that helps. Like, that's a really good thing. But eventually that does catch up to you when you're walking that many people, because you walk 2 guys and you give up a cheap hit. Like, that's a run. The walks are the part of the equation that I am worried about. But at the same time, seeing the whiff rate up at a pretty solid rate and seeing the strikeout rate up at the same time, I think it's actually more believable, the production this year, than it was last year. But it's not sub-2 ERA production, at least in terms of the process. Like, he's not pitching as well as the ERA would say by any means. If he can curb the walks even at just a reasonable rate, then I think a lot of what he's doing this year is actually very good and something that could be very, very helpful. But no one can get away with an 18% walk rate over the course of a full season. Like, he's going to have to cut that down.
Yeah, no, you can't do that. I do wonder sort of the interplay of, because he's doing a really good job of keeping batters off the barrel here, and I guess actually the barrel percent is 34th percentile. So I guess that isn't actually guys aren't making hard contact. The hard hit percentage, that's 79th percentile. So he's doing a good job on that stuff. But I do wonder about the interplay here between him not getting a lot of chase. His chase is only 20th percentile here, 26.2%. And him still striking out a lot of batters, but not, obviously you talked about with the walks. I don't think it's an ideal thing for a guy who isn't, like, you can live with walks if it's leading to, so if you're out of the zone and you're missing, and obviously nobody can miss at this rate, 17.7% is nuts. But if you are getting guys to chase out of the zone frequently, it's at least a little bit more explicable from that perspective, that like you can kind of, if guys are chasing a lot, okay, you're going to have a few more walks, but at least there's like a productivity there. But I also, on the flip side of that, then wonder if he is able to start getting into the zone more, and because guys aren't chasing, he's not getting a bunch of chases, he could probably get away with walking fewer guys and not have it necessarily come back and bite him, if that makes sense. So I do wonder, but when the walk rate is up that level, it is just you're an accident waiting to happen. There's something bad that is going to happen, and so you wait for that eventuality to come. But it's an interesting profile. I don't know where are you on the shape, because I know you had a lot of concerns about the fact that the fastball did not come in and was not what we got from the Orioles. We've never really seen the fastball shape that came from the Orioles. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. And it's slightly better this year, but the thing that he's done is, to his credit, I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for this. He has completely reinvented himself as a pitcher. He's throwing the sinker, throwing the cutter, now he's got all 3 fastballs. He only had the 4-seam when he got here. He's throwing the breaking balls. He's got the changeup, which has come a long way since he got here as well. So, like, he's acknowledged even publicly a bunch of times, like, I don't know what happened to the fastball, but I know I don't have it anymore. So I have to figure out a way to work around that. And we've seen the velo jump up a little bit this year. Like, we've seen some 97s. I don't know where it is in terms of, like, on average from last year, but my guess would be it's up a tick. But either way, it's more about how he's just kind of become a 6-pitch pitcher basically out of nowhere. and he deserves a ton of credit for it. Now, I would guess that's probably also contributing to some of the command issues. You're throwing a lot of pitches that you don't have a long time frame of work with and comfortability with, and that can lead to some of those different release points and maybe the ball just not feeling right coming out of your hand on certain pitches. But I do think I am with you. Like, I think if he gets in the zone more, I don't really expect the hard hit to suddenly skyrocket. Like, I don't think he needs to be nibbling in order for this to work. But he isn't really getting the chase, which means most of this soft contact is coming on pitches that are in the zone, which is a good thing. That's a good sign. And he's still getting whiff. And that, again, means it's mostly coming on pitches that are in the zone. So I'm guessing he's not trying to nibble, or he's not trying to, like, it looks to me like he just almost every outing just loses it for like a 4 or 5 pitch span where, like, even today's outing, he came in and he may have been dealing with some illness or something. He looked a little off, but he just kind of sprayed 4 pitches nowhere near the zone. All of a sudden, after a good start to the inning, everything looked good. He was pitching well, and all of a sudden he just lost it. So I don't know where that comes in or how he fixes that or where it goes from here, but there's a lot to like. But I do think that the walks are kind of the thing that if he doesn't clean them up, it's pretty hard to give him important outs, because those can hurt really, really quickly if you're just walking almost a fifth of the batters that you are facing.
Yeah, he's kind of relegated to middle reliever status, maybe a guy that you bring in. Well, in a normal team, in a normal situation, you'd probably bring him in like when you're trailing by a run or two in the middle innings. But that is somebody else's job right now for some reason. So you do wonder like exactly where that's going to work. Murph does seem to have sort of a level of trust with him on. In general, it's not. I wouldn't say he's in the Murph trust tree, but like, I don't know, he's adjacent to it, or he's hanging out by. Yeah, like he's not necessarily right there, but you know, Murph has at least a reasonable level of trust with him, and will get him into games in quite a few situations at least.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely is willing to use them. It just hasn't necessarily come in the highest of leverage, which I agree with. I think that's the right way to handle it. So moving on to the end of this game, which ended in a really fun, cool fashion with a Bryce Turang walk-off homer off of David Bednar. Number 2, using the pink bat on Mother's Day. Couldn't be written much better than that, because that is the Bill Hall video will live on forever. That I see that every single year. I don't think it's going away at any point, and it's a great moment, and it shouldn't. But now you have a secondary one that you can kind of, I mean, the Brewers already put a side by side together of them, so I'm sure we're going to be seeing both of them for the extended future here. But a really cool moment for Brice Turang, who, that's a star. That's he's bordering on a superstar right now. Like, I can't believe Brice Turang is at that point, given where he was a couple years ago. I'm not sure I've ever seen a development story like this at the big league level, where he went from his rookie year being legitimately one of the worst hitters in baseball to, yeah, he's 20% below average his second year, but there are some interesting things there too. Even in July last year, having a 705 OPS, and then he hits 10 homers in August, and since that point, he has the 4th highest WAR in baseball and a WRC plus that is 3rd in baseball since that time. Like, he has been absolutely insane over the last 100 games, and he deserves a ton of credit for it because he made legitimate adjustments. He added 4 miles per hour of bat speed and turned himself into this genuine offensive powerhouse that just I never would have seen coming, no matter what. I had belief that he could maybe be a league average hitter down the line. I did not think he had any shot at being this level of hitter that he's become. But I know that you always had, I don't know if you believed this much, but you had a lot more belief than I did on the offensive side of things. I mean, just where are you with him right now? Because for me, I think you can start arguing that he's like a borderline top 10 player in baseball right now.
Yeah, he's real close to it. I do wonder, the defense doesn't seem as good as it has been in the past, but he was like legitimately the best defensive second baseman in baseball, or one of them, up there with Nico Horner, right? A few years ago. So a little bit of slippage from that. And he's still, I think, above average. And there's some discussion as to whether or not the metrics are totally capturing all the goodness that Brice Turang brings defensively. But yeah, I didn't see this level of offense coming from him at all. This was a running gag on the minor league extra, which you are now the co-host of with me. But
Yep.
my old co-host James Anderson and I used to go back and forth on this a lot, and it became a running gag of my belief in Brice Turang, despite all evidence to the contrary, that I just wouldn't give up the ghost on that one. And then we saw in that last season that he was in the minors, he did start to hit for some power, and so it started to peak out a little bit. But then obviously right away, yeah, like you said, he was one of the worst hitters in baseball that first year up. But every year has been like a steady progression. He has just gotten better and better. He has learned. And Keith Law takes a lot of stick from people on this stuff, but like Keith Law deserves credit because he did say from way back when he always had Brice Turang on his top 100. He was always high on him and said that basically once Brice Turang learns which pitches to attack, and I think in the parlance that we use now, I don't think it was used so much. People didn't talk about A swings and B swings so much back then, but now I think basically he would have said like once he learns when he needs to get his A swing off and when it's going to be okay to do that, he's going to be something and he's going to actually hit for a decent amount of power because it's in there. It's just going to be a matter of him recognizing that. And sure enough, that's where this is all gone, right? Like this is where that has headed. So yeah, you didn't expect that level of power to come out, but when you look at the metrics, the underlying numbers on this stuff, he became a different hitter last year in terms of how hard of contact he is making. This isn't some like I think Sal Frelick was a little bit more fluky, though he also made some real improvements. It just he moved from like third percentile to like eighth percentile, which is good. It's progress, it's what you want. But Turang really actually did make real substantive progress on this in a way that suggests, I think, that this is pretty real and sustainable. So the question then becomes, what is the long-term outlook for him? And yeah, the Brewers still have him under contract now. He cannot. This is his first year of arbitration, but he was a Super 2, so he isn't eligible to become a free agent until after the 2029 season. So they still have 27, 28, and 29 with him. And you wonder how that's all going to play out, considering this breakout, what the Brewers generally have been looking for in terms of contract extensions, which has been earlier than this for the most part lately. This group has been earlier. And also just the fact that they are so loaded with middle infielders in their system that a ready-made replacement for Brice Turang seems like probably something that's not that far off in the future here for them. You don't know exactly who it's going to be, but there are a number of names we could rattle off here to talk about and say, yeah, that there's potential replacements. But that's more of a problem for us down the road. We don't need to worry about that right now. We can just enjoy the fact that Brice Turang has emerged into a player that, yeah, even the most optimistic person in the world on Brice Turang, me, never would have seen coming.
Yeah, and yeah, we don't need to have the whole contract extension talk right now, but I can't help lately but wonder if he's going to end up putting himself into that Braun Yelich type of category where they're willing to go beyond what they normally would to keep him. Because if he's a 900 plus OPS guy moving forward, like I think there's a chance they do view him that way, and they've always been internally incredibly high on Brice Turang, and like they've stood by him, and it's always been like they really believe in him. So again, even I would guess even the Brewers didn't see this coming, but I do think he might be the type that they're willing to do that with. So maybe this isn't one where I'm not as sure it's a foregone conclusion that if he doesn't get extended at like a lower rate, that means he's gone. But again, that's something we can worry a bit more about in the future. But yeah, I don't know. He's just been on that level where they are willing to do that for the right people. We've seen it before. And it lines up pretty much with when Yelich's deal is running out too.
Yeah, so that and I have a term for this that I have used and coined quite a while ago now, and I call these the Mark Attanasio vanity contracts, where he signs a guy to a contract that's going to take him into his decline years. He did it with Braun, obviously, when they extended him. The first Braun extension was not a Ryan Braun vanity contract. That was he was taking him through age 31, and then he was going to be a free agent. And that was a perfectly reasonable. That's more in the line of like, say, Jackson Trio. Jackson Trio is not a vanity contract. The second Braun extension, that's a vanity contract because that's a contract you didn't necessarily need to sign, and you're going to be taking a hit at the end of it because you know there's going to be a decline in there. And then the Lorenzo Cain, I would you could put it into the category of a vanity contract. It was another one where you're taking the decline years. You know you're going to get decline at the end of that deal, but you're doing it because I think there was a regret on their part that Attanasio had let Lorenzo Cain get away. That obviously they got Zach Greinke out of that deal, but like I think there was a regret there that they had done that, and so bringing him back, it just in that situation, it made a lot of sense. And then obviously Christian Yelich, not the original contract they got him on. That's not a vanity contract, but the extension sure is. That is a deal where Mark just seems to want to have his guy. Like I want to have my guy. And there usually is, there's like a star element to that player and all of that. And I would say, I think you're onto something here that they could make the argument for Bryce Turang if he's willing to play ball on it and is willing to take. They're not going to give him, the kind of money he's going to get in free agency. That won't happen. But there's a possibility that they could say, you know what, we want to make this guy like the franchise cornerstone, and you probably do worse as far as franchise cornerstones than him. And like I said, Jackson Chourio doesn't qualify as this because Jackson Chourio is a free agent when he's 30. So you're not buying the decline years there. And I think this team can afford one contract to a guy where they're paying a lot of money for a guy into their decline, but it's not going to be quite at free agent prices. Christian Yelich had to take a discount. Ryan Braun had to take a discount to get that money. Not a huge discount, but there was definitely a discount given there. And I think that's what's going to be required from Turang to get an extension. So even though we didn't say we were going to do Brice Turang extension, here we are, Spencer. Here we are.
That's all right. That's usually how it goes when we're together. We say we're not going to talk about something, and then we talk about it for like 10 minutes, but that's fine. I think that was a productive conversation. So that can lead us into the Padres series, which, again, got off to a very good start. The Brewers won game 1, 6-4. Brandon Sproat looked very good in this one until he clearly had nothing left in the tank when he came back out for the 6th inning. Velo was down a couple of ticks. He gave up a home run to Miguel Andujar and then another hit. Shane Drowan came in, cleaned it up, got out of it for him with 2 strikeouts. Once again, Drowan has looked very, very good in his bullpen role since he moved into that pretty much full time after the one start he made at the beginning of the year. On the offensive side of things, Joey Ortiz, a home run, first time in about 10 calendar months. He actually just missed a grand slam in his next at bat as well. Got under it a little bit. I know Murph even said he thought he got it. So it was another good swing. He settled for a sac fly on that one. The other big hit in this game came from Sal Frelick on a 2-run single in which he hit it about as softly as I've ever seen a ground ball sneak all the way through the infield. Kurt Hogue had a pretty funny picture that he tweeted of the left fielder about a foot out of the infield saying, this is how the Brewers hit 2-run singles. The left fielder picks up the ball right here. It was about as softly hit as it could be, but we did get a question about this from Mason, who asked, a common compliment of the Brewers is that they put the ball in play and they get a lot of timely hits. The detractors call it luck, but can timely hitting actually be quantified? The Sal Frelick hit is a good example of a hit that's called lucky, but I'm not as sold on that. So I will say, just watching Frelick on that swing, that looked like a guy who was very much trying to guide the ball that direction, no matter where the pitch was. He tried to inside out a pitch that was essentially on his hands. And because nobody was over there, Machado had to kind of guard the line and take away the ability for someone to steal third base with ease. Or no, I guess it was second and third. He just was guarding the line because Frelick often hits the ball down the line or he hits it up the middle. I don't think he actually hits it to where the shortstop normally stands very often. And it looked like Frelick very much tried to guide it that way. I don't think that's a sustainable way to hit. I don't think it's something that you're capable of doing very often. I think Sal Frelick has very good bat control, and I think he is somebody who, if someone can do it on the Brewers, he can do it more often than other people. But I don't think it's a sustainable way to do it. Now, I do think the Brewers are legitimately better at this type of stuff than a lot of other teams. I think just calling it pure luck isn't really doing it justice. I do think they putting the ball in play, like you said in the question, they do it a lot more often than other teams in these situations. They have a lot of speed, which allows for those types of choppers and balls in play to become infield hits, even that score a run. It also allows for the little blooper to fall in and to score 2 runs instead of 1. Like, the athleticism, the way they play the game, I do think it leads to some of this stuff working out better than it would for a lot of other teams. So I don't think that's firmly luck based. But I also am not convinced that they can just guide the ball, do things like that, like just put the ball where they want to put it, because if they could, they'd probably do it all the time. I think it's more difficult than that per se, but I do think they're better at it than other teams, and I think it's a real skill that they do have, and it's a roster construction skill as well. Like, this is something that they are well aware of when they put the team together. But I don't know, Ryan, are you convinced that guys can maybe guide the ball a little bit more or do things like that? I have a hard time with that. It just feels like pitching's too good for anyone to be able to really do that these days.
I think that's the big thing, is pitching is just too good for that these days, to be able to make that a consistent way that you can have success. However, and you basically already hit on this, but the idea is that for this team, part of this team construction is that they are looking for guys who are disciplined. They look for guys who will make contact. They look for guys who have speed, and they look for guys who just generally sort of will put pressure on the other team, right? And that is Frelick to a T. That is the definition of him and why he is a useful player. That in the defense is why there was some discussion of this afternoon about, he hasn't been that good this year. And what are we thinking about where Frelick stands these days? And I think that it's because of all those other skills that he possesses that you can sort of live with this, and he could be a useful piece for the team. And they're showing you what they think of him by continually moving him down. I mean, he's down to the 8th spot in the lineup now. He's almost all the way down there at this point because he has gotten off to the slow start. But I think that when you take all of it together, when you take the whole package together, he has some abilities to do things in this vein that other hitters are not going to have nearly so much. It's not a way. This is not how you build your offense. This is not what you want. This is a complementary thing that you have in addition to some other things. And if this is how you're getting, if this is how guys at the top of your lineup are doing things, you got a problem. But when it's your 8th hitter and he also plays really good defense, I think there's room to get away with this. And also just, he fits into the team aesthetic, right? Or not even aesthetic, like just their general, the way they want to do things, the way they want to play baseball, the discipline, the contact, the hard running, all of those things, the defense. He just fits into that so well that it's fine. Not everybody's going to be a star, right? Like, not every player out there is going to be a star. There's room on your team for a Sal Frelick who gives you, other things and other abilities. Not a guy I would necessarily want to run a long-term contract extension to, but yeah, I think that there is such a thing as like getting lucky by design, and he does have the ability to get lucky by design sometimes, but it's not necessarily like how you necessarily want to build an ideal baseball player. But in terms of being useful, I think he can be useful.
Yeah, like you said, I think you can't build an entire team out of these types, but if your 7, 8, 9 hitters, or just your 8 and 9 hitters are those types, and I think that can be the argument for a Joey Ortiz too, even though there's been, obviously this was a good offensive game from him for the first time in quite a while. But if you have a Frelick and an Ortiz as your 8 and 9 hitters, and you have a strong lineup prior to that point in the lineup, like you can feel fine about what they're going to give you overall. And that's kind of the thing. But as we've seen, when there's injuries and guys are out and you're missing some of those guys, and then suddenly it's like the 6 through 9 hitters are kind of in that vein, then things can get a little bit more difficult. You got to do a lot of bunting. You got to do a lot of small ball stuff like the Brewers have tried to do with David Hamilton and those types. But for this point, yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And I think, like, for Frelick, I think he's a little bit better than he's been this year. I think he's going to end up having a little bit better numbers than he's had. I don't think he was as good as he was last year. I think he's going to settle somewhere in the middle between where he is right now and where he was last year. And that could be a 700-ish OPS, maybe a bit lower, with good defense, stealing bases, doing the little things on the field, and bringing like an edge that you do need to have guys who play like Sal Frelick in your lineup too. I think there's an element of just somebody who's going to go all out every single play, do everything he can to win a game. I think there's value there, but like you said, it's not somebody that you can have all over your lineup. I think that's when it gets a lot more concerning.
Yeah. One other thing about this game before we go on, Brandon Sproat in this game, I mentioned this at the time, and it seemed like he really understood the assignment in this particular game because they had a solid lead. I think towards the end of that game, they were up, what was it, like 6-2, and Sproat came out and was basically just throwing he was throwing strikes, and he was in the strike zone, and he was doing that, and that felt very much like a step of progress for him. Like, yeah, I'm just going to pour in strikes here. And he did give up that home run to Andujar, right? Like, he gives up that home run to Andujar. And I said, the comment I made was, yeah, okay, he understood the assignment. You just, at this point, you're just throwing strikes when there's nobody on. You're working on, and if somebody beats you, okay, tip your cap, and you still got a 3-run lead at that point, and they still did. So I think there is progress. I feel like Brandon Sproat is making progress in learning the ways of being a pitcher. And I think we kind of saw that for as an example in this game of him just, once he got the lead and had that comfortable lead. And I don't know how much he's had just like comfortable-ish leads so far this year to work with. Like, I think he's been kind of having to dance on a razor's edge more often than not. And so, or already being behind and just trying to limit the damage. When he had that comfortable lead, it was sort of like, yeah, okay, you're going to go ahead and pour strikes in until, like you said, he did seem to lose it there, and that he just didn't have the velo, or he didn't seem to have the stuff at that point towards the end of the game. I don't know if the velo itself dropped, but he didn't seem to have the sharpness at that point, at least.
Yeah, so. and the velo had dropped a couple ticks at that point, and I think the only other game you could probably compare it to is the Cardinals start he made when the Brewers gave him a quick, I think 4-0 lead. That was the Vaughn 3-run homer in the first game. And he did have some walk issues. He barely got out of an inning. He ended up not giving up a run in the inning, but he essentially walked the bases loaded. Got a line out and then got a double play to get out of it. So I think even just learning from that, like you said, like, I know he didn't give up a run in that one. He gave up some runs in this one, but I think there is some learning going on there where it's like, okay, I've got a nice lead. I can't be walking guys in. I can't be walking guys in general, but I especially can't be walking guys in or giving up runs that way. I just got to go attack. And I do think he's learning some lessons there for sure. The other 2 runs in this game scored via a Brice Turang are 2-run double because he's just constantly hitting right now. But those 2 did end up being kind of big because Trevor McGill allowed a run for the first time in a while now in his outing, and then Abner was able to shut it down and finish off the 6-4 game in this one. Game 2, this one was a 3-1 Padres win, although it was 1 pitch away from being a 1-0 Brewers win. Jacob Misiorowski, again, we don't need to talk much about it because we went through the whole thing earlier, but 7 innings, shutout, 4 hits, no walks, 10 strikeouts. I don't even know that he, kind of like you talked about earlier, I think he was pacing himself a little bit and then kind of emptied the tank a little bit later in the game when he had a chance to probably what he figured was going to be his last batter, I would imagine, in the 7th inning as he was up over 90 pitches. He ended up going back out to warm up for the 8th, but then he cramped again while warming up. Like I said, I'm not overly concerned about the cramping. I do think it's actually just a sign of how much he's using his legs, and it's just going to be part of the equation for him where he's probably going to have to learn something to try and help it. But as somebody who dealt with leg cramps throughout his entire career, well, at least high school on, I tried everything, and it was pretty hard to figure it out sometimes. Your legs just are struggling with it. So hopefully they can find something. But either way, if the cramps are going to come in the 8th inning after 7 shutout, I'm going to live with the cramps and be just fine. So, like you said, I don't know, like you said earlier, like he paced himself probably a little bit better in this one. Mm-hmm. Is this kind of what you're looking for from him going forward? Obviously, not expecting 7 shutout with 10 strikeouts every time, but just the way he handled this start.
Well, I'll tell you what impressed me in this game was I think through 3 innings, he was up close to 60 pitches. He was in the mid to high 50s. And then he reeled off a succession in the fourth, fifth, sixth inning, were all single digit pitch counts.
Yeah.
And so he was getting guys to make contact early and weak contact at that. And then I think that last inning in the seventh, I think it was only like 11 pitches, if I'm remembering correctly. That is a real sign of growth. That is something I'm looking for, to be able to pitch deep into games, to be able to do the thing that, ace pitchers do, to be that guy. You have to figure out how to get some quick innings in there and not just be every inning is, 15 to 20 plus pitches when things are not going great. You got to get some quick innings in there. And so that was really nice to see. And it reminded me of a game by Paul Skeens against the Brewers. I believe this was last year, though it may have been his rookie year too. I can't remember exactly when it was, but he had a high pitch count situation too. And so, and we were all watching the pitch count because it was like, well, we're salivating to get him out of the game. We're like, okay, run that pitch count up, get Skeens out of there, and then we'll go to work on their bullpen, right? And then he stabilized and started reeling off good inning after good inning after good inning. And you're like, oh, okay. He has the stuff. So that parallel between those guys, and I don't think Miz is at Skeens level, because I don't think anybody's at Skeens level right now. Skeens is at a different level of pitcher than anybody else in baseball, I think, especially with Skubal now on the shelf. But that was very interesting, and it triggered that memory in my brain of how Skeens had that game where he was also in pitch count trouble and then worked his way through it simply by getting quick outs. So another positive development sign, I think, for Misiorowski that I appreciated.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I kind of forgot about that going in, but yeah, I think he was right around 60 after 3, and then to end up at 93 after 7 and actually going out for the 8th at that point. Yeah, that's a really good sign of growth for him for sure. Offensively, the Brewers scratched their one run across early with a fielder's choice to score the one run. The Brewers were one strike away from ending this game with a win. Abner Uribe had Xander Bogaerts in a 1-2 count, ended up walking him on 3 straight balls after that, and that set up a 3-run homer by Gavin Sheets. Couple things I want to talk about there. I was in the right field bleachers for this, so not the greatest view for me to start talking about pitch calling, but I went back and watched the sequence, and it made me even more annoyed because it was exactly what I thought was happening in the bleachers out there. 1-2 to Bogaerts, and the second strike was on a foul ball on a sinker off the plate away. In that moment, I just kept saying, and my brother was right there, I just kept going, slider now, slider away, go slider away. He threw another sinker. Okay, 2-2. Throw a slider here. Go slider. I want the slider really bad here. Threw another sinker. Ball 3. Now I want him to go to the sinker because I don't want to walk him. I want to go at him and make him catch up to 100 miles per hour and try and elevate it. It's Xander Bogaerts. He's having a better season than he has recently, but I don't think he's catching up to it. I was going for the strikeout beforehand. Now I want to go to the sinker and try and get him out on a ground ball. And they go to the slider now and he walks him. And it's one of those things where I have had a lot of disagreements with William Contreras lately on pitch calling. I was feeling okay about it early in the season, and he's really starting to bother me again, where I just am not on the same page as him. And there's plenty of good stuff that he's doing. And, I don't want to make this a whole I rip on William Contreras thing, but like, I don't think there's a single logical part of that sequence that I can come up with. I can't think of anything. It wasn't like Bogaerts was way late on this sinker away either. Like, he was on time. He just couldn't reach it because it was too far away. To me, that is the exact time you go to the slider, start it on the plate, and dive off of it. I can't say for sure, but I am very confident if he executed it even decently, they would have struck out Xander Bogaerts. Anyway, that's my rant on that. Now, he gets on second, and now you've got a lefty up, and they went back-to-back sliders. I don't mind the calls on those. Abner left both of them up. He's got to execute it better than he did. I will say, and I saw someone else mentioning this, Abner, and I went back and looked at the video, but it looked to me like Bogaerts may have been trying to get a peek into the glove. And I went back and looked at video. Abner's showing quite a bit of the glove when he's got guys on second base. And it made me curious. I was like, okay, how is he doing when there are guys on second base? Like, is he tipping here inadvertently. Like he's kind of opening up the glove and letting the runners potentially see what he's throwing. Overall on the season, with nobody on second base, he has a 25% whiff rate. It's not a big sample. It's 11 or 12 plate appearances with a guy on second, but he has a 10% whiff rate when guys are on second base. To me, that smells kind of fishy. Like that, I'm not even like quality of contact isn't a ton different, but just the fact that people are making so much more contact, there's not as much chase. He's not getting as uncomfortable swings. It makes me wonder if teams are kind of relaying what he's throwing. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to be very clear on that. Like the Padres should be doing that. If they can get into the glove and tip off their hitter what's coming, they should be doing that. That is their job. But it does make me wonder, because I went and looked at the video after seeing Bogaerts kind of moving around weird out there and not really taking an early lead off a second. I wonder if Gavin Sheets knew a slider was coming in that moment and made it a little bit easier for him to turn on what was actually an outside slider and still get it out to right center. So those are the two things where I understand like why everyone's frustrated with Uribe right now. And I don't think he's pitching great, but I also don't think he's pitching as poorly as like some of the numbers are saying right now and some of the results are saying. But I do wonder if there are some low-hanging fruit things that he can take care of that'll help clean this up. And another thing that I don't love is it seems like they're trying to throw the sinker up this year. That makes no sense. Don't do that. If that's actually the goal and I'm seeing that correctly, please don't do that. If you want to go up, he has a four-seam fastball. It's not good, but it would be a better option than throwing the sinker up. It makes no sense to do that. So I don't know. My concern with Uribe is more about how he's being used, like pitch mix wise, and what he's throwing and where he's throwing it than anything else, and whether he's tipping with guys on second, because I think there's a chance he is. I don't think the stuff is in a bad spot right now. I think he's in fine shape to continue being the closer and probably will do well moving forward in that role. But this game was annoying because it felt very avoidable to me in this inning, and it just seemed like, again, maybe I'm wrong, but it just felt to me like going slider to Bogaerts on either 1-2 or 2-2 and throwing it decently would have ended the game. And obviously, in the end, it played out as poorly as I could have imagined, so that makes it even more annoying for me. But yeah, just a lot of things in that inning that I wasn't happy with, and then also left me wondering if he is tipping pitches. So I don't know if there's anything in there. I just rambled about a bunch of stuff that you want to hit on. But yeah, that was kind of where my mind was at in this game. And again, the Brewers won 5 of 6 on this homestand here. It just sucks that Miz's start more than anything kind of got not wasted, but to an extent wasted after having such a good outing and then kind of seeing it go away there in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, the offense obviously in this game just didn't do much. So that's
Right.
part of this, right? Like it's hard. You don't expect to win a game when you score one run. That being said, when you get to one out away from winning a game 1-0, you do expect to get that done. And especially with a guy like Abner Uribe on the mound. And I don't know what to make of Abner this year. I really don't. I'm torn. Obviously, the StatCast, there's not nearly as much red as there was last year. You look last year, it is a very, very red page. And this is much more of a mixed bag. He's not getting nearly the chase that he was getting. He is not getting nearly the whiff that he was getting. He's walking more batters than he did last year. All of it it doesn't look as good. The inputs here are clearly not as good as what it was last year, but I'm going to take your word for it on it that the stuff, I think, yeah, I mean, the fastball velocity is still 95th percentile. So like, not quite what it was, but because a few years ago he was routinely pumping over 100, but he didn't even really do that last year, right? Like that wasn't really what he was doing. So I don't really know what to think of him yet. I think it's probably okay. I lean towards this probably being okay, but I have worries about what's going on here. And the fact that he's gone through such long layoffs, Murph has really been hesitant to use him that much. You think about how much Aaron Ashby pitches, and then you look at how much Abner Uribe has pitched this year, and you go, it's only 16.1 innings in 18 games. They're clearly staying away from him and not using him as much. I mean, last year you He pitched 75 games last year. He was in
Yeah.
just about every other game last year. And I guess, 18 games so far at this point, there's what, 42, 43. And so it's not too far off from that pace, I guess. But it just feels like he hasn't pitched as much as, as frequently as he was last year. And actually, we should also point out that like Uribe was backed off late in the year because he was apparently dealing
Yeah.
with something that we don't know
Mhm.
what exactly it was. So it's my curiosity is piqued here and not in a good way. I'm kind of wondering what is going on with him, and you don't know, but something seems off here. Something definitely seems off, and relievers go through this. This is definitely
Yeah.
we've seen it. Though the Brewers really, this generation of Brewers fans, I'm an old, as you can tell, we're on video here, so I'm not usually used to being on video. And I was talking with a coworker today, as luck would have it, about the fact that Brewers fans just don't have a lot of practice in having bad late inning relief where you don't have a lights out closer, because we basically, for the last decade, have rarely had late inning relief. And this usually included both the ninth innings for sure, and often the eighth and the seventh as well, having, their standard is having one at least lights out reliever, and more often than not they've had two or three throughout this time period, going back to Corey Knebel and Josh Hader and Jeremy Jeffress way back when. And so we're not really used to having struggles like this in the ninth inning. I guess the one time period we could kind of isolate was July of 2022 when Josh Hader was really struggling. But this feels like that by comparison to basically anything we've had since then. And it doesn't feel great, Spencer. I don't like it. This is not great when I'm wondering, oh boy, okay, here comes our closer. What shenanigans are going to happen tonight? I'm not used to having that thought creep into my brain, that intrusive thought, and I don't like it. And I'd rather it would not be there, but kind of feel like I don't have a choice at this point, because that's just what's happening right now with Abner Uribe when he comes into the game.
Yeah. No, and I think that's totally fair, and I imagine that is the case for most people watching right now. I definitely don't feel as comfortable as I did last year when he comes in, that's for sure. In terms of the stuff, I do wonder. I think the slider velo is down a decent amount, and I do wonder about the sharpness of that pitch and whether it's going to get him the same level of swing and miss, because the shape is basically the same when you look at it, but the velo on that one is down. Like you said, the fastball velo is not that much different at this point, especially he had a bit of a slow start. After that, it's been up more to where it normally would be. The slider had a week or two where he got up to like that 89, 90 range with it a lot, and that was his best stretch. Like, he pitched really well during that stretch. So I wonder if that is part of the issue here, if he could maybe tighten up the slider a little bit. Even if he lost a little bit of movement on it and threw it harder, I think it might be better for him. But that would be maybe the thing I would look at as to where he goes from here. But yeah, it's definitely not the same comfort level that we're used to with him from last year, or just generally at the end of games. But luckily in game 3, there was no high leverage innings needed, because a lot of times the non-leverage arms have been as good or better than the leverage arms this year, kind of like you were talking about. The Brewers took this one 7-1. Kyle Harrison had another very solid start, going 5 shutout, only 5 hits, no walks, 7 strikeouts for him in this one. His ERA is down to 2.09 on the season now as a full-time starter, going back to opening day. So a very, very strong start to the season for him. DL Hall came in relief. Don't really know why. Didn't think there was any need for that in a 7-run game at the time, especially when it looked like DL Hall might puke on the mound or something. He looked sick. I don't really know why he needed to come into this one, but DL Hall got an inning. Grant Anderson had not pitched in over a week. He got his first inning in a while. Had a scoreless inning, but it wasn't super clean, with a hit and a walk mixed in, no strikeouts. Brian Fitzpatrick was able to finish it out the last 2 innings. Struck out 2. He did walk 1, but it came after an error and a little bloop hit that kind of extended the inning. Ended up allowing an unearned run because of the Andrew Vaughn error on. It was a weird play. It was a really side spinning ball that just kind of flung out of his glove once it got in there, but it looked like one of the most routine plays you could possibly have to the naked eye, and then he just booted it, and it was one of the weirdest looking errors I'd seen in a while. But either way, it didn't really hurt anything, ended up causing it to go from a shutout to a 1-run game for the entire pitching staff today. But On the offensive side of things, Luis Rengifo had a pretty solid homestand in general, but especially the Padres series. In this game, he basically created like a 4-run swing of his own in the first inning. He made kind of a lunging, diving play to take away what would have been 2 runs on a grounder with 2 outs in the top of the first. A pretty nice defensive play. And then in the bottom of the first, he had a 2-run single. So a 4-run swing basically on the back of Luis Rengifo, which was good to see. Brice Turang had another RBI double. Gary Sanchez had an RBI double. Andrew Vaughn had an RBI single. And then Rengifo had another RBI single in the fourth. So like I said, he's been figuring some things out lately. But for the most part, this was one of the more laid back, easy wins the Brewers have had in a while. A nice way to end a very, very productive homestand. On the homestand, the Brewers starting pitching was incredible. 32 and a third innings over the 6 games. They struck out 45 in that time to only 9 walks. They only gave up 25 hits in that span. They had a 1.95 ERA. And the age of the 4 starters who made those 6 starts were Miz is 24, Kyle Harrison's 24, Brandon Sproat is 25, and Logan Henderson is 24 as well. So we've talked about, the Burns, Woodruff, Peralta trio for a very long time. I'm not sure anyone but Miz. Kyle Harrison's kind of showing that he could be up towards like maybe more the Freddie Peralta type of deal where it's not a ton of deep starts, but it's a lot of strikeouts and very productive run prevention. But this is looking like a really, really fun group of young pitchers who are all in the big leagues performing and doing a lot of really good stuff. I'm not sold that they're going to reach the levels of those 3 because it's pretty hard to put those expectations on anybody, but probably about as exciting a group as you could imagine outside of that trio, right, at this point.
Yeah, I in the offseason was talking about this as being kind of one of the stories of the season was, and that was before they had made the trades for Sproat and Harrison, but just wondering the young Brewers pitchers that they have. And at that point it was, it was Miz, it was Gasser, it was Henderson. Some of those guys were more the ones that we were discussing, but wondering if this was going to be the year that those guys establish themselves and take the team forward. And you go, okay, they didn't have a lot of proven starters coming into this year, but you come out of it going, oh, now they have a bunch of proven starters and now it's looking really, really good. And I definitely wondered that. And this is hopefully it coming together and us seeing that come to fruition. But young pitching especially is always tricky and you're always worried about injury. And so as soon as you feel confident about this, I was making this joke on our podcast this last weekend that the thing to do once you think you have enough pitching, once you've gotten to the point where you think, hey, we've got enough starting pitching, is go get more of it.
Yep.
And so that is just, you can never have enough. You always need more of it. And fortunately, the Brewers seem to believe that as well and have acted on that. And when other teams would have been satisfied with, not having a Kyle Harrison and a Shane Drohan, the Brewers were not satisfied. And they said, we're willing to give up Caleb Durbin to do that. And think of where this team would be without Kyle Harrison and Shane Drohan right now. I think it would be quite a different place. So yeah, you really like it and you cross your fingers and hope, because it's a tough thing to rely too much on young pitching. I remember the conversation I had with Baseball Prospectus's Jonathan Judge back around 2020. And he was saying, when we were kind of surprised, hey, look, the Brewers projection for this year is kind of better than we thought it might be. And he said, well, that's the power of what Pacoda thinks of all their young pitching. And we all know that you should really, really build your hopes around young pitching, right? And it turned out that was actually a good thing, and that was actually the case. That might have been actually going into 2021 that he said that. And it turned out to be the case, but you can never take it for granted that it's going to be the case, because pitching will break your heart, man.
Yes, and like you said, it's a good organization to be rooting for if you're aware of that, because they do seem to be fully aware of it themselves, and they will go out and continue to add it. They're going to have guys genuinely, especially when Henderson was down there, you had pretty much a major league caliber rotation in AAA for a stretch there. You had a rotation that the Rockies would probably run out and feel better about than what they run out there every day. Like that's where they're at with their depth, and that doesn't include Tate Keener, who's not even on the 40-man, and some more interesting arms in Double-A. Like they keep building them, they're going to keep bringing them up, and then they're also going to go out and acquire them when they think there's a good deal out there, like with Quinn Priester, like with Kyle Harrison and Shane Drowan. Like they will keep adding it, so it's a good place to be. But you're right. You can't completely rely on this working out. It's just, it is a very exciting time for the young pitching. But we have a good chunk of listener questions we're going to get to. And there were 3 or 4 that kind of combined here, but I'm going to go through all of them and then we'll just kind of revisit it as we go. So Tyler asked, now that the position player core is back to what it was on opening day, what's a realistic time of the season when we see Cooper Pratt, Jet Williams, or Luis Lara get the call up? A bunch of numbers asked. I understood the argument against calling up Lara due to lack of playing time earlier this year, but considering how bad Sal and Garrett have been at the plate, when do we discuss calling up Lara to potentially take their ABs? He's just as fast and possibly better defensively. So let's just those 2 for now. In terms of the timeline for Pratt, Jet, and Lara, of those 3, I still kind of lean towards Jet Williams being the first. Now, Pratt's the only one on the 40-man, so that in and of itself may give him a slight advantage. And Cooper Pratt he's been hitting the ball a lot better lately. The hard hit rate's way up. He had a 109 exit velo the other day, which was a top I think he's had at any point in the minor leagues. So that has been good to see. And I could see him playing his way into the consideration for it, especially because he got the contract. He's got the 40-man spot, but I still lean towards Jet. I kind of think June for Jet is where I'd be kind of looking at. I think somewhere in the first couple of weeks of June, if none of the infielders are working out yet on the left side, like we've seen Rengifo figure some things out. They like David Hamilton, and I think they want him to continue getting playing time of some sort. And Joey Ortiz finally had a couple good swings, so we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of where I would lean. Lara is, to me, still going to be injury dependent. Now it's getting close because there have been so many injuries with Lockridge going down. And now if Yelich goes back on the IL, they'll probably just bring Tyler Black back. But you start to wonder about some of the guys out there. I mean, Garrett Mitchell's numbers have fallen off dramatically. Sal Frelick definitely has not been what you'd hope he's going to be. You can make an argument for Lara now, and his expected stats are kind of trending the right way as well. He's hitting the ball harder and at better launch angles lately. So I think you can make the argument for Lara more now than before, but I still think it's probably going to take an injury to Mitchell or Frelick for him to really get or Churio, I guess you could say. But one of those 3, I think, probably has to get hurt before you see Lara up. I think Jet's first in line. Is that your read as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think with Lara, you want him to be, I don't think you want to call him up and then have him sit on the bench and get like the Blake Perkins number of plate appearances. That's
Right.
not what you're trying to accomplish. That doesn't do anything for you. I was leaning towards Jet Williams getting kind of ready. I'm a big believer in you call up guys when they're hot just to get them kind of a soft landing and just so their confidence is up. Hey, they're seeing the ball well. They're feeling good about their swing, all of those sorts of things. I don't know how much that actually really matters, but I feel better about it personally, calling guys up when they're going well, because I think it's, psychologically, it's probably easier for those guys to pop in at that point. And if you look over the last 28 days now, Jet Williams is hitting 264, 381, 425. But over the last 7 days, it's down to 188, 440. So he actually has been taking walks here, but
yeah,
188, 440, 250. So he hasn't been as hot lately, and you'd kind of like to see that be the case. He does have a double in there, but I don't know. It's tricky. I'm not going to be surprised at any point when they call Jet Williams up at this point. We've crossed that point where it's like, okay, I'm ready for it sort of whenever they do it. But I do like to give guys a softer landing when possible.
Yep, I would agree with that. John asked, what would you set the over-under of combined Major League plate appearances taken this year by Jet Williams, Cooper Pratt, and Jesus Madej? That is a really good question. I kind of think you're probably only looking at one of them getting regular playing time, if any of them do. So if I'm setting my June timeline for Jet, 250, maybe 200 to 250, somewhere in that range. I don't know. I'm bad at over-unders, but I feel like that's about where I would think about it.
Yeah, I think when he comes up, you're going to want him playing most days, if not quite every day. But I mean, 4 to 5 days a week, you're going to want him in the lineup. So I think that once he does get up, that's what you're going to see. So I lean that direction. Pratt's a whole other thing because this is more of a long-term project. And so I don't know exactly what I would expect. I think we will see Pratt this year. I don't know how much we're going to see of Pratt this year. I do think we see Lara, but again, it's tricky because there isn't really a regular playing time spot for him to get in at this moment. I think if you set the over under for all of them at 500, I wouldn't have any trouble taking the under. I wouldn't have any trouble taking the under. 400, it gets dice here. So I think somewhere in that neighborhood is probably about right, though that could be way off. I do want to make a little bit of a plea. This is a plea I made on my podcast a couple weeks ago on the Cooper Pratt thing. And it is just to say, Cooper Pratt is probably going to come up and he's probably going to struggle offensively. He's probably going to be quite good defensively, and he's probably going to struggle quite a bit at the plate. He is going to take time. If he is going to grow into power, it's going to take time for that power to grow. Does this sound familiar, like anybody that we've just dealt with in this organization? I'm going to implore people to be patient and take their time with Cooper Pratt. He is very, very young at this point, okay? And they've given him this big contract. They clearly believe in him, and there are a lot of good underlying skill sets there. But for him to come up and be a good offensive player, I think is going to be a multiple year process that is not going to happen right away. And so you're going to have to live with some growing pains and some development. And people do not like to be patient about this stuff. People like to pass judgment right away, and they like to be there's this instinct people have to be like, I want to be the first one to declare this guy cooked or useless or a bust. You don't get bonus points for declaring a guy a bust before everybody else. There's no prize given out for that in baseball fandom. You win an award for that. So I am imploring people to just be patient with Pratt, because if this is going to be a successful thing, it is almost certainly going to take time. So please understand that and be patient and be kind to the young man about it throughout this whole time. He doesn't need to get the Joey Ortiz booze that he gets sometimes when things get particularly bad for him. And we need to see that happen here for young Cooper Pratt. That is the end of my plea.
Yep. If we're hearing that sound, it should be because it's a Coop chant at some point.
Yes.
That's what.
Yes.
So we can just sell him on that. If they do start booing, we'll tell them, no, it's they're saying boo earns. But yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think you're going to have some patience with him, and when he does make it up, I think people are going to want to move on pretty quickly when they see how he looks offensively at first. But the argument as to why he's not coming up over Ortiz right now is that I don't think the Brewers view them super dissimilarly right now. I think they probably believe Pratt's going to give you similar offense to Ortiz, and then he's going to give you a really good glove, and you're going to be happy with the defense. But if people want a better bat, I don't really know that you're getting that from Pratt right away. Eventually, I think you will, but you're going to have to be patient. Tyler asked, which reliever could be on the tightest leash in order for Yoho to return to the big league level? I mean, to me, it's probably a guy like Brian Fitzpatrick, who I think looks like he's belonged and has looked like a big league reliever when he's gotten into games, but he's got options. This was his first game in 11 days. Really all him, Anderson, and Woodford had not pitched in over a week, which is a very long time for three relievers to somehow not get used a single time. But I think Woodford's actually shown some decent stuff, and I don't think they want to move on from him, even though results haven't been great. I actually do think the stuff is in a pretty good spot, and he hasn't had the best of luck on like grounders and stuff, just kind of finding holes. So I'm guessing he'll have a little bit more time no matter what. I think right now they're not really going to be pushing for Yoho to force his way back into the big leagues. He's looked good. There's been a lot of good stuff, but I also don't know that he's totally improved upon a lot of the things that I thought he needed to, which was being able to zone his pitches more often. Like, he needs to be in the zone with all his pitches more. I think the changeup command's been good. The rest of the command of the 4 pitches outside of that, I'm not as sure about. And I think that's where the Brewers want to see him get to. So I don't know that they view any of the players in their bullpen currently as worse than Craig Yoho. And if that's not the case, especially given most of them don't have options, I don't think he'll be up there. Now, I still like Craig Yoho quite a bit. I think he's going to help at some point here. But that's where I'm landing right now. I don't know if you have anything on Yoho that your thoughts on, anybody that you think he should be replacing in the pen right now.
No, because Craig Yoho is on the 40-man roster, and as such, there's coming for this team a run, and you knew I was going to have to mention this. There's coming a run where they play 19 games in 18 days,
yes,
going into the All-Star break. A couple of weeks after that, they're going to be playing 16 games in 16 days. And then like 2 weeks after that, they have another run where they play 16 games in 16 days. Craig Yoho is going to pitch during those time periods. Everybody is going to pitch during those time periods. There will be a shuttle. They will have multiple guys sitting around at all times ready to go for making a roster change, going into the next day. Craig Yoho is going to pitch during that time period unless he's somehow like off the 40-man, which would mean he got hurt and is on the 60, right?
Right.
Craig Yoho is coming to pitch during that time period. So don't worry about that. And just in general with relievers, there's always going to be a rotation of how this works. There's going to be guys being sent down and guys being called back up. And yeah, I mean, I know part of the reason why the Brewers have all these runs with all these games is they've had so many off days. So over the last week, they didn't play that much. So they had that double off day thing where you have the Thursday off and then you have the following Monday off, which is always obnoxious when they do that, because don't do that. Off days are precious. We want to economize them and spread them out. But yeah, I mean, that's when this is going to be an issue, is like you're going to have different guys pitching, and Murph is going to have to trust some guys that he maybe doesn't want to trust in tight games, because you're not getting through a time period like that by just like spamming Ashby and Uribe and McGill every day. You're not going to be able to do that. It's just, you can't.
Right. Yep. Agreed. Cheese City fan asked, Andrew Vaughn's bat speed has fallen 3 miles per hour to 67.8 this year, which puts him near the bottom of all qualified hitters. Since bat speed usually stabilizes quickly, should we be worried about his potential power output given the hamate injury? Yeah, I think it's a fair thing to be a little concerned about. Now, I looked up all of his swings this year, and his top bat speed against the White Sox right before he had the injury. So I think there probably is something to that, where he may have been pushing a little bit more before the injury. Since he returned, he's only broke 75 miles per hour one time. So I think there's probably something to that. So the expected hard hit, it really hasn't been in a bad place since he came back. So I think he's still going to be capable. The high-end exit velos, he might not be getting to the bat speed until a little bit later in the season. Thing is, he was never a big bat speed guy. It was always kind of in that 30th percentile range or so. I'm not super concerned about it, but it is noticeable, and I do think it's almost certainly tied to the hamate. I think there's got to be some connection there. And it might make it so that some of the balls that maybe would have barely cleared the fence in the past are going to be warning track shots. But I just don't expect it to hurt him too much, just given the way he's been swinging since he came back. And again, a lot of the expected stuff still is in a pretty good place. But yeah, I think that's a fair observation, and I think it's something that definitely is worth keeping an eye on as we go forward.
Yeah, Vaughn generally is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're having some interference going on.
I know. Yeah, for those who are listening, we're having some issues with the internet, but Ryan, go ahead, talk about Vaughn.
Oh yeah, just in general that the bat speed in general, he's kind of a lower bat speed guy and still generates power from that. So I'm less worried about this. And also just coming back from the hamate, that is a thing that is like this is a known problem that you guys dealing with hamates are going to have issues generating power. I don't know if that necessarily manifests specifically in the swing speed, but it's certainly possible. So I need to see a lot more before I start to worry about this, but he's not a big bat velo guy anyway. He generates his power other ways.
Yep, exactly. The final question we got was from Frederick, who asked, curious in a general sense, do you guys have a preferred way to structure a batting order, or is it mostly just smart to pack the top with your best hitters and switch handedness? Yeah, that's pretty much where I land. I think you can play around with that a little bit, where you might be able to trick a manager into, let's say you have Vaughn and Gary Sanchez both on the bench like they did earlier in the series, and you stack some lefties in your lineup, and then you convince a manager to throw a lefty against that pocket, and then you can go to Andrew Vaughn or Gary Sanchez against that lefty as a pinch hitter. Like, I think you can play around with that a little bit, but for the most part, I really don't care too much about it. I want my best hitters to get as many at-bats as they can possibly get, and then I want to try and create matchup issues by the way I stagger the lineup. That's pretty much what it is.
Yep, get guys who get on base at the very top of the lineup and get guys who hit for power behind them, and in general, everybody else goes after that. And then stagger the opposite-handedness where you can, where it makes sense.
Yep. That can take us into the minor league sandbox then. So we did get at least one question here, and one of them was from Eric, who asked, what do we think of the rooks, meaning Bentley, Holden, Mills, and Hughes? So these are really just the day, what used to be day 3 picks. I guess they were all day 2 picks last year, now that everything is on day 2. But the high school picks from last year's draft who are in the ACL starting off, he asked any surprises or exciting notes. So Mikhail Holden, he has thrown 9 total innings so far. He's only allowed 1 earned run. He struck out 11, only 4 hits. He's walked 5. But the stuff looks good to me. I think this is a really interesting profile that Mikhail Holden has. The velo's been up to 90. He had a random 97. I don't know that I necessarily trust it fully, but he's been up to 95. He sits in the low 90s. He's got legitimate separation between all of his pitches. So the four seams got good separation from the changeup. The slider and the curveball have good separation from each other. He spins them well. He'll get up near like 2,900, even close to 3,000 RPMs. Mikhail Holden's been a really interesting arm so far in the complex league. Chase Bentley, he's only thrown once so far. He had 4 shutout innings. He only allowed 1 hit. He walked 2, struck out 6. His velo, though, was like 85 to 87, touching 88. The shapes on all his stuff are not bad by any means, but the velo is a long ways from being playable currently. He's definitely going to need to get it up into at least the low 90 range. But he is a young dude who has a body that seems pretty projectable, and like he should be able to add some velo to the frame. So statistically, a good start to his career. But right now, I think he's probably the furthest of some of these arms from actually being able to move to like full season ball just until that velo goes up. CJ Hughes, I have heard some very legit buzz on CJ Hughes. The switch hitter who was seen as somebody who didn't have much power coming out of the draft, a really good glove, a guy I kind of called out as somebody I thought might be a Brewers fit because of the glove and the athleticism. But I didn't think the power would be there, and I definitely didn't think power was going to be there right away. And it sounds like it's already kind of showing up after putting on some really good weight this offseason. So Hughes right now has a 149 WRC plus. He's got a 25% walk rate. He's already got a home run. Strikeout rate's too high. It's at 35%. But this is another guy that he's off to a really good start and a really interesting start. It actually makes me wonder if it's going to be kind of Braylon Payne-like, where it's a different profile than you thought it was going to be initially, but in the version of like a switch hitting shortstop, which would be, I think, a pretty fun one to follow moving forward. Rylan Mills is another guy who, great start for him. He's got a 188 WRC plus so far, 2 homers already. 16% walk rate to a 12.5% strikeout rate. So the bat is getting some buzz down there as well from people who have seen him. Some of the exit velos have been like 107 plus a couple times already. I haven't heard anything on the defense behind the dish in these ACL games, but I do know that the Brewers were quite happy with it post-draft last year when he got to instructs, when he was playing in some of the extended spring games and everything. Like, they were pretty happy with the defense, almost like surprised with how solid it was, because Mills came from a very, very small school in Missouri, came to a Brewers tryout up in Milwaukee that they invited him to, and he just jumped out with how well he performed, and that's why they ended up taking him. But it was kind of a flyer in the sense of they didn't know what they were going to get defensively as a catcher, and they've been very happy with it so far. So on those four, like, I'd say very good start for all of them. Bentley, again, probably in terms of like the pure stuff, is the one that is going to have a longer time before you start seeing him move up the ranks, I would guess. But for 4 high school picks taken post round 10, it looks like the Brewers might have done it again on some of these guys, which is pretty impressive. And I just always look forward to seeing what they do with this. Ryan, I don't know if you've seen much or heard anything on these 4, but is there anything you want to add on them?
No, I haven't paid much attention to these guys so far yet. So this is where I rely on you to tell me these things. So
Which is fair.
Sitting here for a while. I should just take notes during the minor league extra during the Spencer's minor league sandbox.
Yeah. I took my name off of it because you've got your minor league stuff too. So we're gonna include you, but I'll talk about the complex stuff and I'll include you more on the others. Dustin Mayorkin, another name that I really, really like, has gotten off to a great start at the ACL level. He's thrown 5 innings. He's got 8 strikeouts to only 1 walk. He's got a 63% ground ball rate to go with it. Ton of whiffs. Brewers PD posted some really good video of him against the Cleveland ACL team from this past weekend. Bunch of swing and miss, really good secondaries. The velo's been like 91, 92 for the most part. I saw him up to 95 this spring. He hasn't popped that on StatCast yet, but it's a pretty fun arm for an 18-year-old who's showing a lot of good stuff in the secondaries, especially. And then the other complex league arm I would have highlighted is Mikhail Holden, who we already covered with the above on the or with the earlier on the just the 4 high school guys that we were asked about. So Jaden Dubanowitz made his first low A start of the season. He went 3 innings, struck out 5, didn't give up any walks, and only allowed 2 hits. The velo was up a little bit, quite a few 95-mile-per-hour fastballs, and Chris Edwards and the Wilson announcing crew were doing a very good job actually reading them more often this time, which made me very happy. Please keep that up if you happen to be listening. As many velo ratings as I can get, I'm taking them. So help me out here if you can. But he looked good. I think he's got it. And just looking at the mechanics, I tried to compare it to some of last year's, and it wasn't as big a difference as I thought, but I do think he's using his legs better this year. It's kind of herky-jerky. It actually reminds me a little bit of like Kyle Harrison's lower half, but from the right side. But I like it. I like the way he's moving. I think the velo is going to be up a little bit as he goes forward. And the shapes in the ACL when he was doing his rehab appearances were better as well than they had been in the past. So I think he might have found something here. It's another really interesting teen arm from, again, what was a day 3 pick a couple of years ago. Dubanowitz looks like an arm that's probably on the edge of like the top 30 in the system for a really, really good system. So another great find from the Brewers here. Anything on Dubanowitz from your end?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about what was going on with him because I saw the numbers at the ACL and then wanted to see ACL. I wanted to hear what you had to say about that start at A-ball. So no, that's I'm more interested in these next guys because they have been people that you have talked about quite a bit and we've had a lot of discussion about.
Yes. Yeah. Jaron DeBerry had a very, very good start this week, which was wonderful to see. He went 6 innings. He allowed 1 earned run. He gave up 2 hits, only walked 1, and struck out 10. So the 10 strikeouts to 1 walk is especially the exciting part there for DeBerry. He had a 39% whiff rate in this one. I went back and watched the whole thing because I missed it live. Man, the breaking stuff was good. I mean, it was just everything he was throwing, and the opposing team's announcers were kind of in awe at the 7-pitch mix he was mixing out there. Like, just a lot of different looks. Now, I wasn't getting velo readings from them, so I don't know where the fastball velo was, but I do know that the shape of it in Double A so far this year has been quite good. He's even gotten up over 20 induced vertical break, which he was nowhere near last year. So that's an interesting part of the equation too. Again, makes me wonder if maybe the baseballs have changed, if guys are getting much different and better, or just different shapes in general, I guess. But the only run he gave up was a solo homer that snuck out to the smallest part of the park in right field. So this was just a dominant start from DeBerry. Really, really good to see, because it's been a rough start for him to the season. Speaking of that, Bishop Letson, he's been a bit better lately. His last 4 starts, he's gone 17 innings. He's got a 4.24 ERA, 16 strikeouts to 8 walks. Still not a great place to be in terms of the strikeout to walk ratio, but much better than it had been early in the year. The command has still not been great, and I don't buy that that's going to be a huge issue for him moving forward. It doesn't concern me a lot. It especially is concerning me less as we start to see him kind of rein it in as the season's progressing. Like, he's going to need to keep showing that. But if he can continue to cut it down, I think that early season walk issue is probably going to show up in his stats all year, to a point where it's going to be hard for it to ever look great. But I think if you can cut it off at a certain point here and say, hey, this is where he started to figure out what he needed to do to throw more strikes at Double A this year, it could end up looking pretty decent there. And then another name that I like, Carlos Cara. His last 2 starts, 10 2/3. He struck out 12 to 5 walks. Again, not great in the walk department, but a lot better than it had been early in the season. Only 4 hits in those 10 2/3. And then Cara also only gave up 3 earned runs. So that's a 2.53 ERA in that time, and a 32.5% whiff rate in those 2 games. So 3 names that I'm very high on, that I'm higher on than average, I think, who had all been off to pretty slow starts. It's nice to see them all kind of getting going. I'm not totally sold, especially on like the Letson outings lately. They've been better, but still not where I'm hoping to see them eventually. But those are 3 names that I definitely like, and I like the way they're trending. Anything from you on those 3?
Yeah, the big thing to watch on all of these guys is this walk issue. And we've talked about that in the past, where like something seems to be going on this year where there's just a lot of walks in the minors, just all over the place right now. They're just, guys are taking a ton of walks. Pitchers seem to be having issues. You've speculated that it could potentially maybe be the baseball, possibly, but we don't know, because this does seem to be an issue below AAA, which is where they use a different ball. Below AAA. So who knows? But it is good to see that some of these guys, especially, Bishop Letson, we had such high expectations. We're really hoping for this to be the breakout year where he established himself as a no doubt stud pitching prospect. And that's not how the season started. So it's good to see him riding the ship and getting going again. But and there are other guys too, like Bryce Message. We're hoping to see better command from, like, improvements on this stuff. Tyson Harden got off to kind of a rough start as well this year. So improvements are needed and welcome at this point for the pitchers in this system.
Yes, agreed. Moving to the hitter side of things, just a few complex guys. Again, Ryland Mills and CJ Hughes would have been 2 that I absolutely would have brought up. But since we already talked about them, Braylon Antonez, he crushed a home run a couple days ago. StatCast had it at 114. There were some questions as to how hot StatCast was the other day. But he posted the internal metrics, which still had it at 113. So he crushed it. Absolute bomb for an 18-year-old. He also had a 112-mile-per-hour single in that game. The overall numbers have not been great. The strikeouts are too high. He's at a 74 WRC plus. I love his swing, and I really think that it's going to come together for him as he just gets more comfortable. By all accounts, he crushed it in the spring, and then he also had a really good extended spring when they're not keeping track, and there's no public stats or anything, but I'm not super concerned about the numbers early on. I think the swing looks so good, and again, I just heard so many good things from the beginning of spring on that I'm pretty confident he's going to get going here. Alexander Frias, he's got a 112 WRC plus. He's already got 2 homers. And he also has a batted ball of 117 miles per hour, which he confirmed on his Instagram story as also still being at 117. So apparently that's real. And he also has quite a few more over 110. I believe at least 5 more that are under 10 miles per hour already. The ground ball rate is pretty close to 50%, and many of the hard hit balls have definitely been more in that negative or 0 degree launch angle where it's more of a ground ball. But that is major, major raw power from a 18-year-old who also is not striking out much. The walks haven't been there much early on either, but I think of Hendry Mendez and then like a souped up version of Hendry Mendez who's really put things together since the Brewers traded him, and he's with the Twins organization in AAA now, showing some good things. But that's who Frias reminds me of with, again, I think the ceiling's a lot higher because Mendez was popping some nice like 108, 109 exit velos at this age. Frias is popping like the hardest hit balls that the Brewers would have this season as an 18-year-old in the ACL right now. So that's one that I was really excited about coming in. I think he's looked really good. And then the other one here is Jonathan Ronhell. He's got 19 plate appearances, so it's a small sample, but he's already got 2 homers. He's got a double, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. I see some Anthony Siegler similarities here where he's caught. He was also a third baseman, and he played some second his first year in pro ball. He's mostly, so far this year, he's DH, played first, or caught. But I wonder if they might be looking at him as somebody who could maybe fill that role, even when you look at like the body type and the swings and everything else. He's lefty only, like Siegler basically became as he became a Brewer. But I like Jonathan Ronhell. I think that's a name that probably isn't talked about much, but I think there's some interesting things here and a little bit more pop than I would have expected. He was a 2-year DSL guy because they put him at catcher his second year and kind of slowed the entire, just the way they were moving him through the system got slowed down because they put him at catcher, and he hadn't caught. He was not a catcher at all his first season. So this was like learning a new position, but it sounds like it's going decently there. But that can take us into full season ball here. And Andrew Fisher, I talked about quite a bit last week as something that I was very, very concerned about. And this 1 week is not going to change anything, but it was very good timing for him to figure some things out on that end, because he, in 5 games, 26 plate appearances coming into tonight, had only struck out 5 times. So that's a 19.2% strikeout rate. And the whiff rate was only 22.2% as well. But not only that, he also hit very well during that time. He had 3 homers and a 14-18 OPS in that time frame. So hopefully this is just a sign that, like, if you look at the rolling whiff numbers, they are coming down a bit over time. But again, I'm not going to take this whole week as like, oh, yep, he's figured it out. But if he's anywhere close to this, yeah, Andrew Fisher is the guy that we were all thinking he was in spring. Even finding a happy medium, I'll feel pretty good about it. He just cannot be at those 40% rates on both of those. Seeing him get down here, even just in a smaller sample, is nice to see. I would think for everyone, right, Ryan?
Yeah, AA is going to be interesting once he gets there, and I think we will see that at some point in the not too distant future, especially if, like you said, if the strikeout rate and whiff rate stay in this low 20s area for a while, that would be really positive. So
yeah. Luyan Alastre, who I talked about early last season in low A, and then he got promoted to high A very quickly and struggled quite a bit after the promotion. Since he started this year in low A, back in low A. Since he got promoted a couple of weeks ago, he's got 35 plate appearances with the Timber Rattlers. He's slashing 330, 486, 519 for a 10.05 OPS. His whiff rate is 8.9%. The strikeout rate is only 8.6%. The walk rate is 22.9%. And he's had some extra base hits. He's showing a little bit of slug where there's a little more exit velo than he was showing in the past. He's going to be 20 the entire season. I really liked the swing in low A last year. Like, I was kind of excited. I thought them pushing him to high A might have been like a sign that, oh, they're pretty high on him. I think in reality, they just felt they needed somebody, and he was actually kind of lowest on their internal list from the guys at low A. But every time I watch him, he just feels like a guy who doesn't get much shine in the system, but I find very interesting, and he looks like a baseball player to me. Again, it's a small sample, 35 plate appearances, but a really good start in high A after struggling there last year is nice to see for me for a guy who, again, is going to be 20 all year. But staying in Appleton, we've got Josh Adamszewski, 974 OPS this week, which actually brought his season line down for the season because he was over 1,000 coming into the week, and he remains over 1,000. But he still hit his 7th homer and also doubled twice this week. He's really going to be forcing his way into Biloxi at some point here. I think it's reasonable they haven't done it yet, but I think within the next few weeks, if this is even close to the same level of production, it's going to be pretty hard to tell him you need to stay in high A right now because there's not a hole to pick in this profile right now. The whiffs are in a great spot. The strikeouts are in a good spot. The walks are in a good spot. He's hitting the ball harder than ever. He's already surpassed his season high in homers by 2 or his career high in homers by 2 this year. Yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it feels like a foregone conclusion that he's in Biloxi sooner rather than later at this point.
Yeah, that does seem like a good bet.
I can't imagine he doesn't end up there at some point here. It's been so impressive to watch. But that can take us to Biloxi, where we have Matt Wood, who had a 3-homer week. He's up to a 116 WRC plus for the Shuckers. It's an interesting line. He's hitting 178 batting average wise, but he's got a 367 on base and a 452 slug. So the power's been there. It's a different profile than we're used to seeing from him. It hasn't always been that way. It's normally been average with decent power, but this year it's been very little average with a ton of walks and some pretty good power. So we'll see where that goes from there, but nice to see him at least producing in some way in AA again after a solid stretch there last year that really put him back on the prospect map. Blake Burke, he hit 3 more homers in the past week. He's up to 11 this year. At some point, you have to wonder if Nashville's calling his name because this is really big power. This is something that for next year, the Brewers might want to know if this is an option for 2027 too. Like Jake Bauers is actually officially out of team control after this year, and Andrew Vaughn will be getting quite a bit in arbitration. Like, is Blake Burke going to be a legitimate option for them going into the season with the mix of, the Luke Adams and the Brock Wilkins, who I'm going to talk about in a second here too. But I wonder if he gets moved up soon just to see if they can actually view him as an option for 2027.
Yeah, it's possible. He actually did I'm watching the Biloxi game here, and he did just single in their first run of the game. So they're now down 5-1. And right before that, Wood actually took a walk. So continuing that trend you're talking about of
Perfect.
A huge split between that batting average and on base percentage. So everything was playing out to type there, I guess, other than the fact that Burke, it was an opposite field single, basically through the hole at shortstop, where he shot that thing. So, but yeah, they didn't end up cashing in more than that, unfortunately, and they're still down 5-1. So, yeah, I do wonder about this. Burke probably is waiting for a spot to open up at AAA, right? Like, and so that will take us into that next bit that you wanted to talk about here, because could it possibly be Brock Wilkins' spot that is going to open up for that? I do wonder.
I wonder too. And I, frankly, just given I don't watch a ton of Sounds games, like fully at least, because it's mostly guys I've seen so much through the system. I like watching guys that I haven't gotten the chance to watch a ton already. I turn it on and I'll watch them, and I try to get at least a good view of everybody. But I knew he was on this 29 game on base streak. I figured a lot of it was kind of fluky, just looking at like the overall season numbers. There were a lot of things that weren't great there. He had, some things where his zone swing rate on the season is 50%. So only 50% of the time when it pitches in the zone is he swinging, and that's it's second percentile in AAA. He doesn't swing hardly at all. The whiff rate was a lot higher earlier in the season. It's actually been climbing into a better place. So I kind of noticed when I went on and started looking at some stuff, I'm like, oh, he actually is improving a lot of season-long numbers. So then I tried to break it down from where this 29 game on base streak started. And since that point, which was April 10th, he has an 836 OPS. It's a 250, 388, 448 slash. In terms of the exit velo stuff, it's really not much different. He has his max exit velo during that stretch of 109.2. That is something that's a little disappointing to me for a guy his size. Like That's a Luis Lara max exit velo or a Cooper Pratt max exit velo. Like, that's not who I would be expecting to only be popping 109 at his peak, but that's kind of been the book on Wilkin. It's never really gotten as high as I kind of expected it to in some of the exit velos. But at the same time, he is cutting the whiff down significantly. There's a lot of good angles being played here. Like, the expected weighted on base average is up to 331 in this stretch. And he's got a 365 overall, but I think that's within, the standard deviation of like, okay, that's reasonable. You can be within 30 points or so, and that can be legit. There's a lot to like here in this time. And again, seeing him make this much contact, that he's got a 19.6% whiff rate during this whole 29 game on base streak. Like, that's a really good whiff rate for a guy like him. The strikeout rate's only 21%, and the walk rate all season has stayed pretty high. It's at 18.2, but this is more legit than I was expecting it to look. And again, given all the talks we have about third base and who's going to help that spot, we haven't mentioned him. No one really mentions him because his overall season numbers still don't look very good. Like, it's a well below average line on the whole, but he started like 1 for 30 something. So since that point, it's been way better. I wonder if the Brewers would actually be more interested in giving him a look than people are maybe thinking, including myself, because he is Rule 5 eligible this offseason. He is somebody who, like, they kind of have to make a decision on at some point in the next calendar year. I don't know that he'd be somebody that necessarily would be a Rule 5 pick, or at least one that would stick. I could see someone taking him if he was left unprotected, but I don't know that he'd be one that sticks. I could see him being trade bait too. Like, I think there's a lot of things they could do with Wilkin, but it hadn't really crossed my mind that, like, he could be an option for third base. I don't know that I buy it still, but I'm more convinced than I thought I was going to be after looking at some of the numbers and looking what he's done during this stretch. Do you think he's somebody that they're kind of looking at here?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I think that, well, first off, this is very reminiscent of last year where he got off to an absolutely terrible start and then had a really hot run. Now, last year's hot run was really driven by slug. He cracked a ton of home runs there, and then he got hurt right on the verge of, we were all expecting him to be called up to AAA at that point, and then he had that unfortunate injury during the celebration when they were celebrating their first half title. But yeah, with this, I don't know. I don't know if this profile, how well this works. I mean, I'm looking at these Z swing percentages, and it's just, yeah, I get that he is like never swinging at pitches outside the zone. I get that he's really, really good at avoiding that. But a big part of that is he just doesn't swing very much. And that does fit with the whole Brewers thing. Like, that is what they're looking at, and that's what they want to have here. But I don't know. It's also just like the timing of this probably isn't great for him right now because Rengifo is starting to heat up.
Yep.
And so, like, he's not going to come up and take that spot. And I don't know that his defense is at a point where they would just be like, hey, we're just going to hand you the third base job and let you run with it. I don't know if they're ever going to just hand Brock Wilkin the third base job and let him run with it. So you do wonder exactly what the role is here for him and how this would work. I suspect that the best way for him to get called up at this point would be an injury. I mean, that seems to be the more likely thing than anything else, right?
Yeah, I would imagine it would take either Rengifo getting hurt or Rengifo having just it falls apart on him and he's just not an option. But even then, Jet Williams is probably still ahead of Wilkins. So, like, I think it's hard to find it in a way that actually makes sense for everybody involved, and putting him on the 40-man and using a spot, like, because you're going to want Jet to take a 40-man spot. So essentially you'd be making 2 40-man moves by adding Wilkin, because Jet's going to take one at some point.
Right.
I don't think it makes a ton of sense, but I just wasn't expecting the case to look as it's decently strong as it actually did when I started diving into it. But yes, I am with you. You have to swing more than that at pitches in the zone. It doesn't have to be an insanely high rate. It's technically up 5% during the good stretch versus the bad stretch, but still at 55%. That's 6th percentile in AAA. Like, it's going to have to be a little bit higher than that. I don't think you can be that selective. And I've always said with him, it just feels more passive than like it's actually patience. and that he's like really good at taking like the borderline pitches. Like it feels like he just goes up there and goes, I'm not swinging at this pitch. I'm not going to swing at this pitch until maybe 2 strikes. I'm going to be a little bit different, but yeah, it feels more passive than patient to me, and that's always been part of the difference between him and Luke Adams for me too. Like I always kind of thought Luke Adams had a little bit more of like, okay, he is taking a lot of pitches, but they're not like middle fastballs on first pitch. Like I see that from Wilkin when I watch. Like he's going to take a pitch right down the middle because he just kind of went into it saying, I'm not swinging at these pitches. And I never saw that as much with Adams. But Adams' zone swing rate, I believe, is lower than Wilkins this year. It's a small sample for him because he got hurt, but Adams is lower. So those two are both in a very similar spot, I think. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, but yeah.
Yeah, the thing with Wilkin is it just seems like he's probably more a guy. It's going to be hard for the Brewers to ever give him the run that he needs to establish himself, because I feel like it's going to take time for him at the big league level. He's going to have to do stuff, and the Brewers doing this we contend every year thing, that's just going to be tricky to make work. Especially, it would be one thing if he was like an exceptional defender at third base. Right. I think it would be easier for them to say, okay, we're gonna ride that defense and we will let you work your way in. And I think actually that might be a key that we need to understand about how the Brewers are doing this, where having a defensive floor that's really, really high and giving a guy that sort of way to get in allows them the flexibility to let guys have some time to develop in a way that and still be productive members of a winning team, that Wilkin just may not get that opportunity. And so I think your idea that he might be trade bait, I think, is unfortunate, because I like him and I would like to see him get a run out with the Brewers. But it does feel like a situation where maybe that just isn't going to be possible for him, where he's going to need to move to some place where he can just play every day and not have to worry about the fact that there's going to be growing pains here. It feels like there's definitely going to be growing pains with Wilkin. If he's able to have a successful big league career, it seems like he's probably not going to hit the ground running and just be good from the beginning. It's going to probably take some time.
Yep, I would agree with that. We'll close out with a couple live updates from the T-Rats game, because Braylon Payne's 2 for 3, and he had a 110-mile-per-hour homer today, his 7th of the season for him. Josh Adamszewski is 2 for 2 again. He has a triple. He's up to a 1060 OPS, batting .333, and Andrew Fisher has a strikeout today, so that he's 0 for 2 with a walk and a strikeout. But him and Payne both have 947 OPSs now, and yeah, Batante's at 855. Josiah Ragsdale I didn't talk about, but he's showing power this year. There's a lot of good stuff at that T-Rats level right now, and Daniel Dickinson even had a three-run double, I believe it was, today. So that's good to see from him, because he has really had a rough start to his pro career. But that can wrap up everything with the Sandbox here. Ryan, thanks for joining me. We went even longer than Jack and I do normally, which isn't a shock when it's us two. But anything you'd like to plug or anything before we sign off here?
Yeah, for you guys, you guys are hosting an event that I'm going to be going to. Yeah, so I'll plug.
You're taking my job from me, but go do it.
Oh,
no. I was going to forget it. Do it.
So this Saturday at Broken Bat Brewery, Brock from Brew Fanatic, and also the Twins. What's the Twins Digest? Is that what that's called?
Twins Daily.
Twins Daily, that's what that's called. Okay. Is hosting an event at Broken Bat Brewery, which is down in my neck of the woods. I will be there on Saturday. It starts at 5. The game starts at 6. It's Brewers Twins, so it'll be a joint effort there. And Brock is picking up your first beer if you show up for that game. So yeah, I'm on my way. I will be up there. I'm gonna scoot my way up there. So that is the plan.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Jack and I both had prior obligations that we had kind of committed to before we knew about this, so we won't be able to make it. But go hang out with Ryan and Brock and everyone else, and definitely pick up that free beer, because I mean that's a pretty good deal. You get to go watch a Brewer game and get a free beer. I think that's a good deal for everyone involved. So yes, thank you, Ryan, for reminding me of that, because I forgot, and that would have been 2 weeks in a row that we forgot. So good call on that. And with that, thank you all for listening, and we will be back next week. I believe Jack will be back next week with a regularly scheduled program for you.